tyrant. A mighty fortress. First tonight, and don't clip any of the bimbos. Bobby Bells. Kelly Marie Shipman and William Cody Brock were both born on the same day in June. Both of them lived in Washington. Both were newly graduated seniors at Hillside High School in Seattle, and both gratefully received welcome birthday presents from their friends and family. For her gift on the day she turned 18 years old, Kelly received a new car from her proud and doting parents. To celebrate his 18th birthday, Cody got to kill a man. Kelly's birthday began at 7 o'clock on a fine summer morning when she bounded down the stairs off her home, in the affluent Seattle suburb of Mercer Island, a bundle of joyful youth and energy and anticipation at the beginning of her life. She was tall and leggy, an athletically perfect blonde teenager with ivory skin, crystalline blue eyes, and a killer smile of capped teeth that had set her father back almost 10 grand. He had been able to deduct the dental work as a business expense, since Kelly had been modeling for advertisements and acting in commercials and on local television since she was 3 years old. The profits she made were scrupulously placed into a special trust for her by her father, who was administrator of the trust, but who wasn't above spending it on his daughter, especially if it gave him a good tax write-off. The Shipman family lived in one of the last remaining small islands of the American dream, in a split-level ranch dwelling located in a gated community which was flawlessly landscaped, well-lit, and discreetly fortified against the outside world. The house had 6 large bedrooms, a swimming pool, a basement rec room containing more sports and games and entertainment gear than the downtown YMCA, and a capacious garage containing at any given time at least 4 late-model motor vehicles, including her father's prized Ferrari. The house carried a mortgage larger than the municipal debt of some American towns, but the Shipmans could afford it. They were among those lucky Americans who were not only still employed, but very gainfully so indeed. Kelly's father, Dr. Edward Shipman, was a cardiologist who ran his own clinic and HMO in Seattle. His company provided 3 essential services: heart attack and stroke recovery, emphysema home care including home oxygen supplies, and outpatient AIDS and HIV care. Dr. Shipman used to remark wryly that our clinic cashes in on the 3 great health disasters of the past 100 years: smoking, AIDS, and the American diet. H. A. Covington. He wasn't joking. With Medicare and Medicaid long gone the way of Social Security, Shipman's HMO catered only to the dwindling number of Americans who either still had health insurance or who were sufficiently wealthy to pay for the services of himself and his doctor partners to keep them alive. Dr. Shipman had also developed a reputation for discretion, which brought him a number of special celebrity patients, whom he treated for assorted embarrassing conditions in a consulting room tucked away in his home. Kelly's mom, the elegantly attired and flawlessly presented Marty Shipman, was senior vice president of a major medical supply firm linked with the HMO. And Kelly herself had already brought in more money from her modeling and minor acting gigs than some blue-collar workers ever earned in their lives. The American dream was very much alive in the Shipman household. This morning Kelly was attired in spotless, glistening tennis whites. She was holding a covered racket under one arm, while in a tote bag over one shoulder she carried jeans, shoes, and a knitted top. "Tennis this early, Kel?" asked her father, looking up from the breakfast table. Shipman was a tall and distinguished-looking avuncular man with a suave bedside manner which stood him in good stead with his well-heeled patients. "Tomorrow morning I could see, since you're going to have a huge birthday dinner to work off," he continued. "How's 8 o'clock at the Belvedere sound? And you can certainly bring Molly along." "Why not invite Craig as well?" suggested her mother, referring to Kelly's intermittent boyfriend. She approved of Craig Crabtree wholeheartedly. Dr. Shipman wasn't quite so certain. There were 1 or 2 dimly perceived warning flags up in his mind regarding young Crabtree, although he couldn't have explained why. Something in the boy's manner, a slight oiliness, a few small but definite indications of dishonesty, a little too casual interest in the drugs cabinet in Shipman's home surgery had put him on his guard where Craig was concerned. Shipman looked at the young beauty at his breakfast table in silent wonder. He knew that she had been a woman for a good while now, and today would make it official. Once again he fought down his panic and his fear at the terrible world she was about to enter, where he could no longer protect her. In the America of this day, to love a child meant quiet, lifelong terror. "Great, Dad. They've got a ricotta quiche to die for," laughed Kelly. "And I already invited Molly to wherever we're going." She pointedly did not mention Crabtree, which her father found relieving. Maybe they were having another spat, and maybe this time it would last. He was honest enough to admit to himself that it wasn't just that he didn't want his daughter with Craig Crabtree, he didn't want her with anyone, not until she was 30, or 35. "Well, good, because that's where we made the reservations," said her mother, who kissed her daughter's cheek. "Happy birthday, honey. Don't worry, I'm hitting the court tomorrow as well, and every morning for a while," Kelly told her father as she sat down at the table. "I've got a couple pounds I need to drop before they get too comfortable on my butt, so I'm going to get in a couple of sets with Molly before class starts every day. We can change in the locker room." "Oh, Kel, for heaven's sake, you are not fat," exclaimed her mother in exasperation. "The scale decrees otherwise," replied Kelly. "Manny says I'm now at optimum weight, and I need to nip any gain in the bud before it gets to be a problem." The Emmanuel Scar Agency was representing Kelly's talent down in Hollywood. Kelly and her best friend and tennis partner Molly Bergstrom were beginning their first day of Advanced Track Summer School at Hillside High School. AT was one of the many dodges that genuinely concerned teachers and administrators had developed in order to try and salvage something out of the ghastly wreckage of the American educational system without actually admitting publicly that it was a ghastly wreck. These days, the public schools consisted of little more than social and political engineering, with a heavy dose of mandatory diversity training and multicultural brainwashing, essentially warehousing the kids until it was time for a few of them to go on to college, and most of them to go into the army or the workforce. Stripped of all its politically correct psychobabble, the advanced track was essentially a way of making sure that at least some of the high school student body, those who were capable of learning, actually got some kind of education. In this manifestation, AT took the form of a selection of college-level courses for academically gifted students. That is, those who could read beyond the level of the TV guide, and those who had demonstrated that they could at least think a little on their own. Even though she had already graduated from Hillside, Kelly was attending a dramatic arts class for those who wanted to get into acting and cinema as a profession, partly for the practice and partly for something to do over the summer before she entered UCLA in September. Kelly was majoring at the university's School of Acting and had already arranged her class schedule around her latest movie. Students at the School of Acting got course credit for actually working on set in any capacity. She had begun her serious acting career that spring. That is her first actual movie and her first venture outside the limited Seattle market, by H.A. Covington. Special permission from Hillside High, Kelly had taken her final course exams in March, which she had aced with straight A's as she always did. She had then spent April and May in Hollywood on the set of the movie studio. She had landed an extensive supporting role in a grade B+ teenage romance flick filmed in Hollywood for a major cable network. The male lead was a rising and arrogant young star with blow-dried hair and a $700 per day cocaine habit at age 17. The female lead was a mediocre actress, aged 28 but playing 17, who successfully gained plum roles through her expertise on the casting couch and didn't care who knew it. In the movie, Kelly Shipman played the female lead's best friend, her character being the head cheerleader that Kelly was at Hillside High in real life. The role had started with a good allotment of speaking screen time for Kelly's character Jill, and the director had been sufficiently impressed with Kelly's talent and camera presence actually to write in some more for her, largely in order to shore up the lead starlet's lackluster performance. Her newly acquired agent Manny Scar had assured her that the exposure would be noticed, and Manny's prediction was already proving valid. Although her first movie wasn't even released yet, Kelly Shipman had already been signed for another movie, a Disease of the Month made-for-television weepy, wherein she got to play not the sick girl, but once again the best friend. "Don't worry, you'll be past the sidekick stage in another flick or two," Manny assured her ebulliently, waving his cigar in the air as he sat behind his desk. "You've got ingenue written all over you. In between B's, I can get you into some C-horror and slasher flicks too if you want. Every star needs at least one bow wow in their youth. They'd rather forget it when they make it to major stardom. It's kind of a Hollywood tradition." At the same client conference before she returned to Seattle for graduation, Scar had also made some insinuating suggestions about how Kelly could go a lot farther in the business if she would agree to at least take her top off on camera. Kelly, who was by no means a dumb blonde, had gotten the clear signal that it would also materially assist her career if she agreed to take her top off in Manny's office as well, on a regular basis. She had firmly but diplomatically turned the conversation in other directions, and Manny had taken the hint with good grace. This time, anyway. Kelly decided there was no point in mentioning any of this to her parents. She would deal with it when she moved to California, and Scar wasn't the only agency in Hollywood. "What time is summer school class over?" asked her mother. 3 o'clock, said her daughter. "Molly wants me to go over to her house afterward. I think she's planning a surprise party, although I haven't let on I know." "Well, make sure you get back in time for your birthday dinner tonight," said Ed. "And don't eat too much cake and nachos." "Oh, don't worry, I won't be late. After all, you two have to give me my present," said Kelly with a smile. "Your present will be rather hard to fit into a restaurant," said Ed. "Oh, what the hell, might as well give it to you now. You're going to see it when you leave anyway. Take a look outside in the driveway." Kelly looked out the window and saw a brand new silver Ford Explorer sitting on the concrete with a large red bow and ribbon wrapped around it. She squealed in delight and ran outside. "Fully loaded, of course, all-wheel drive, front and side airbags," said her father as her parents followed her outside, beaming. "Leather upholstery, full climate control since you will definitely be needing the air conditioning in LA, CD player and DVD screen in the back seat for your passengers, and fold-down back seats for the move. I'm driving you down to California, by the way, and no argument, the keys are in it. Just what the budding young movie star needs to be tooling down Rodeo Drive and Hollywood Boulevard," said Ed. "Now come back inside and eat your breakfast. You'll have time enough to drive it over the summer. By September it will be old hat." "Oh, Daddy, it's wonderful," said Kelly, hugging him. "Yeah, well, when you sign your first $1 million contract, I expect a second Ferrari from you for my birthday," said Ed. "You got it," laughed Kelly, and Ed understood she meant it. The cable news was coming on the kitchen TV, with the newscaster describing the latest suicide bombing against the American occupation forces in Saudi Arabia. The screen showed a roadside in a desert background with several burning American military vehicles in the foreground. Ed Shipman hit the remote to mute the sound of the tube. "No, leave it on," insisted Kelly. "I want to see—" "It's just the same old depressing crap," countered her father defensively. "Nothing new ever happens over there. Good grief, honey, don't we get enough terrorist bombs here in Seattle? You've seen more than enough horrible scenes like that riding by on the freeway. Why do you want to see them on the television?" "Yes, but with Jason over there in Saudi, I want to keep up with what's going on," said Kelly, sitting down and buttering her whole wheat toast. A Covington. "Which is why your mother and I have acquired the habit of ignoring the news," said Ed quietly. "A habit I recommend you adopt, Kel. It's not as if we can do anything about it, so why dwell on it? We could have gotten Jason out of military service ONA college deferment if he'd let us, but he was a real man about it and wanted to do his bit for America, which is admirable of him but pretty wearing on our nerves. What if one day you're watching the news and you see your brother dead on CNN? That's happened, you know, more than once." Kelly pouted. "I know, Daddy. We've been fighting in the Middle East now for how long? Almost since before I was born. Nobody my age can remember when there was no war, at least no war in the Middle East, I mean, not the war here in Seattle." "There's no war in Seattle, there's just a lot of horrible crime and terrorism committed by crazy redneck white supremacists," said Marty angrily, pausing with a fork of poached egg in midair. "The Spuckies aren't white supremacists, Mom. They're white separatists," said Kelly, buttering her toast and adding grape jelly. "And who told you that?" asked Ed suspiciously. "You haven't been reading those damned illegal leaflets scattered everywhere, have you?"
"No, it's on the news talk shows. That's why I watch the news, and I will keep on doing so," she said primly.
"There's nothing wrong with keeping informed. Whatever you want to call it, either here or in the Middle East, it's obviously not going to be over anytime soon. Everybody needs to keep up with what's going on in the world. You can't let yourself be worried every time a bomb goes off over there, or here." "Well, at least this one's not in downtown Seattle," said Ed in disgust. "Not today, anyway," said Kelly. I swear to God, I think your mother and I are going to have a nervous breakdown," complained Ed. "We worry ourselves sick about Jason getting killed by Muslim lunatics in Saudi Arabia, and you getting killed by the white racist lunatics here, just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll be glad when you can move down to LA and get the hell out of here, and that's something I never thought you'd hear me say. Believe it or not, we left California 20 years ago, partly because of all the violence, so you kids could have some kind of decent life." "And also to get away from the Mexicans?" asked Kelly impishly. "Jesus, honey, don't say that even in jest," cried Ed in horror. "Kelly, do you know what could happen if you made a remark like that in public and somebody heard and it was misconstrued?" "You mean if some informer called the hate crime hotline and turned me in for the reward?" asked Kelly in a sour voice. "Yes, Daddy, I know. Jennifer Flagler in my biology class was ratted out to the hate crime hotline, and Mark Janot from the tennis team too, because he told an African-American person joke. The fatties came and took them away to be denazified and have their brains washed squeaky clean. So don't worry, I promise I shall commit no inappropriate japery in public." "I mean it, Kel. It could ruin any chance you ever have to make it in movies," warned her father sternly. "A denazification course on your resume won't exactly impress all those Jewish producers and casting directors, never mind your Jewish agent, even if it is just over some careless offhand remark. I don't want you to end up working in a grocery store checkout your whole life because of some inappropriate joke you made as a teenager. You've worked too long and hard, and you've got too much talent for that." "I know." "Oh, Daddy, don't worry," she exclaimed, her mouth full of muesli now. "I grew up here, remember? The trouble has been going on for 5 years now. Geez, I know what to say and what not to say in public." "And that goes for when you move to LA as well," said Ed. "There aren't any Spuckies in Los Angeles," said Kelly. "Down there it's the crime, the Somali gangbangers, and the junkies. I hardly got to go out at all when I was in Hollywood, except for a couple of daytime tours to Grauman's Chinese Theater to see all the stars' names in the sidewalk. The studio surrounded us girls with armed guards like we were gem-encrusted. About all I saw of LA was through the windows of the shuttle bus between the cast condos and the sets. From what I smelled of the air, I didn't miss much. At least the studios and condos had air conditioning and air filters. The security was tighter there than in the Federal Building downtown, and they're not fighting a revolution in Los Angeles. And you know, that's at least one thing you can say for the Goots. They ran all the gangbangers and street trash out of Seattle. If you don't get blown up in one of their bombs, they've actually made the city a lot safer." "Now what did I just say about making silly statements like that?" snapped Dr. Shipman. "Kelly, please," wailed her mother. "You mustn't say such things. Don't you know that under the latest executive order on speech crime, now your father or I can be arrested as well if someone overhears you? Not to mention what the Goots themselves might do if any of them overheard you calling them Goots," put in Ed, his voice urgent. "Kelly, please take this seriously and watch what you say out loud. These people are heartless murderers, and whatever you may think, they don't just Covington. Murder minorities. I know because we have to take overflow from the emergency rooms every time there's a major bombing. At the very least, even if they didn't kill you, these bastards might kneecap you with a gun or break your legs with a baseball bat if you said something they didn't like, and the situation has gotten so out of hand that most likely nothing would be done about it if they did. Number 1, Hillside High is a rich kid's school and there aren't any Goots there," Kelly responded. "Goots are all trailer trash who drop meth, and auto shop kids. Our shop kids at Hillside all practice on their parents' Lexus. Number 2, you two can't be arrested, not after today anyway. I'm 18 and you're no longer legally responsible for what goes on in my mind." She looked up at the television. "Well, speak of the devil, that's the Eastgate Mall. Turn it up." She grabbed the remote and unmuted the small TV. The cable news program's dramatic music and the well-known Terror on the home front logo in the background came on, the canned lead-in they always used for NVA activities. Terror on the home front was replaced by an unctuous middle-aged white man in a suit. For many years, the station's regular reader in this slot had been a Chinese woman, but she had suddenly disappeared from the television screen without explanation several months before. The newscaster spoke in the grimly solemn tones reserved for reporting rebel strikes. 2 members of the Federal Anti-Terrorist Police Organization were shot and killed last night at around 8 p.m. in the Eastgate Mall. A caller to station KSTA News, who identified himself with an authenticated code word, stated that the action was carried out by members of B Company No. 2 Seattle Brigade of the Northwest Volunteer Army. "Why don't they call these racist bastards terrorists anymore?" demanded Martha Shipman irritably. "Why isn't there any sense of outrage like there used to be back when all this started?" "Because Jerry Reb will shoot the media people if they call them terrorists and make a big deal out of it," said Kelly. "Everybody knows that. What do you think happened to Gloria Tang? They kidnapped Jeannie Vandenberg and tattooed swastikas on her butt, and ever since then the news media are too scared to say anything really bad about them. They just call it balance now." "Jerry Reb?" groaned Ed. "Is that the latest you kids have come up with? Oh, beautiful. You'd think these racist murderers were some kind of heroes now." The local news announcer went on to report that the 2 off-duty officers of the FATPO, a man and a woman in civilian clothes, had apparently been followed into the upscale Belvedere restaurant on the upper level of the Eastgate shopping mall in Kirkland by 2 unidentified white males, and had been shot dead at their table. There followed 2 artists' photo fits of the suspects, one a middle-aged man, smooth-shaven with dark hair. The second gunman was a younger man, with long blonde hair and a herd. The suspects had fled through a fire exit into the mall's parking area and escaped. Then came police mugshots of a craggy-faced, red-headed man of about 45, scowling into the cameras. The No. 2 Seattle Brigade is believed to be commanded by this man, James R. Graham. Department of Homeland Security spokesman told KSTA News that in view of the latest racially motivated criminal activities of the NVA, in Seattle, they are raising the domestic terrorist bounty for Graham's capture or termination to $1 million. Kelly noticed her parents had turned slightly green. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I think we'd better cancel our reservations at the Belvedere for tonight," said Ed. "Marty, do you think we could order in something really nice and catered? My God, if my birthday had been 1 day earlier, we might have gotten caught in the middle of an NVA hit," said Kelly excitedly. "As it is, I'll probably just get waiters and waitresses singing happy birthday." "You think all this horror is funny?" asked Dr. Shipman, annoyed. "Well, not if I was the one getting shot, I wouldn't," said Kelly reasonably. "Everybody else thinks it's exciting, though. When all the other girls down on the cheerleader love set heard I was from Seattle, they all wanted to know what it was like living in a war zone. They were disappointed when I had to tell them I'd never actually seen a shooting or a bombing. Just a lot of black guys and bull dykes in body armor riding around in Humvees, and both of them trying to look down my top at the checkpoints. But I did get some funny looks when I came to a CAS conference wearing a blue, white, and green pantsuit." "That's what we're famous for now?" groaned Ed. "Terrorism? Well, what did the Northwest have to be famous for before the Spuckies came along?" asked Kelly. "Rain and Sasquatch. At least there's no question that Jerry Reb exists." Just as Kelly Shipman was rolling out of her driveway in Mercer Island, on the way to Hillside High and the tennis courts, in her new Explorer, a black Ford sedan with tinted windows and federal government license plates, pulled into a grass-grown alley beside a dilapidated-looking Covington story house with peeling paint in the North Seattle suburb of Ballard, just off 85th Street. The car slid into the backyard and turned around, ready to make a quick exit. A man got out. He was a tall and rangy individual wearing a rumpled blue pastel shirt and tie and a light sports jacket. The second man, who emerged from an upstairs apartment in the house and came down the outside stairs to greet him, was shorter and stockier, and Natalie dressed in full Brooks Brothers ensemble. "Any problems coming in?" asked the man in the suit. "You were right, there's a new fatty checkpoint on the 520, said the tall man. "Thanks for the heads up. I hate the thought of getting boxed in on a bridge." They got Tagger Thornton on a bridge. In the bright morning sunlight, they climbed back up the outer stairs and entered the upstairs apartment. The room had an air conditioner, a device increasingly common in Seattle. Due to global warming, the Puget Sound summers were becoming hot and muggy to the point of being genuinely uncomfortable. The air conditioner was suddenly switched on, although it wasn't really that hot this early in the morning. but the electric motors of older window air conditioners could also interfere with shotgun mics and bugging attempts. The house was one of the many floating headquarters of the Northwest Volunteer Army's No. 3 Seattle Brigade. The building was owned by a cranky old lady who lived on the first floor, and who appeared to be not only deaf but deranged whenever anyone attempted to speak to her. Mrs. Sweetser wasn't unbalanced, unless it was through hate and grief since her only daughter had been abducted from the convenience store where she worked, then raped and murdered by black gangsters many years before. Her house was now divided up into cheaply furnished apartments with plastic furniture, stained porcelain in the bathrooms, and cracked linoleum on the floor. Officially, all the apartments were occupied by elderly people on pensions or private charity doles of various kinds, as well other residents with Hispanic and Asian names that were listed on the doorbell. A truly diverse dwelling if you looked at the mailboxes and doorbells. No one ever actually saw many other tenants in or around the building, diverse or otherwise, but the house was isolated by large green hedges on one side and the brick wall of a paint store on the other, and was the soul of nondescript. So few people ever actually looked. The boarding house was used as a transit point, arms dump, occasional field hospital, and conference and training facility by the 3rd Brigade. The blatantly governmental vehicle which had just parked in the backyard was a form of camouflage occasionally used by the brigadier and his executive officer. There were all kinds of spook cars rolling around Seattle these days, and the citizenry had learned to look the other way and pretend they didn't see, which was the way the NVA wanted it. Commandant Frank Barrow, commanding officer of No. 3 Brigade, was the tall and tired-looking man in his late 30s who had arrived in the black Zogmobile. He took off his jacket and eased down into one of the plastic armchairs, in front of the air conditioner, removing a 9mm Beretta pistol from the belt clip at the small of his back and setting in on a lamp table beside the chair. "Damn, I never can get used to it being hot in Seattle," he grumbled, stretching back to catch the cool air from the air conditioner. "Goddamn corporate bastards and their pollution, creating this heat trap in the atmosphere. We never needed these damned electric boxes in our windows in the summertime when I was growing up." Barrow's dishwater hair already starting to turn gray. His face was seamed and his hair beginning to go prematurely gray from 5 years of tension and underground living, and before that from years on the bottle. The NVA's strict regulation against drinking had probably saved his life even as it was endangered by his participation in the war. He struck one as a haunted cubicle denizen at some marginal computer company, or a burned-out used card salesman, tired and worn and defeated, but his demoralized appearance helped him in his job. In the America of the early 21st century, it didn't pay for a white man to look too sharp. White males weren't supposed to hold their heads up, especially in the Northwest, where some alert FBI agent or fatty might wonder just what the hell a white boy was looking so chipper about. Like most men of his generation, the first generation to be forced into the Army in large numbers due to a combination of unemployment and the draft, Barrow was a military veteran with a 2-year extended tour in Iraq under his belt. Iraq had left him with a shrapnel tear in his calf, a frantic aversion to any temperature over 70 degrees, and a sick and visceral loathing for anything bearing the face of George W. Bush. In his drinking days, he had gotten in trouble for screaming fits and wanton destruction of various advertisements, posters, memorials, book jackets, and television screens, wherein the jug-eared visage of the former president was displayed. Frank Barrow was a former police detective who had gotten royally screwed by the Seattle PD because he had successfully busted a high-profile African-American city councilman on drug-dealing charges. Barrow had found himself back in uniform so fast it made his head spin, and within the next year he had accumulated enough trumped-up disciplinaries and bad efficiency reports to wreck his career. He finally got the message, and H. Covington resigned from the force. It was then that he went on the bottle, paying for his booze with a series of dead-end jobs. His wife had responded by engaging in a string of increasingly blatant affairs. Then she finally left him, taking their 2 children and moving back to Wisconsin after cleaning out the remains of their joint checking account and making the mortgage check bounce, so Barrow lost the house. From that point on, life had gotten worse and worse, until Barrow was seriously considering suicide. Then came the Coeur d'Alene uprising of October 22nd, And all of a sudden, white men with guns in their hands were fighting back against the country and the society that had increasingly degraded and humiliated them for almost a century. At long last, someone was saying out loud the things that Frank Barrow had always known in his heart to be true. Barrow knew some people who were affiliated with the party from his police days. He was able to track one of them down, and through that contact he joined the underground Northwest Volunteer Army. He had begun with one of the first Seattle crews in the bleak winter weeks after 10/22, when the life up the uprising had hung by a thread, and from then on he had used every ounce of the street smarts and knowledge of the city that he had gained as a cop to make Seattle dangerous for federal employees and anyone with a dark skin. Bullets and betrayal brought down the men above him in the chain of command, and he had moved up through the brutal ladder of natural selection, which is war. Lieutenant Joe Dortmunder, Barrow's 2IC for No. 3 Brigade, was a dapper man in his 40s, who was about 20 pounds overweight, but who was always flawlessly dressed in a Brooks Brothers suit, with a fresh haircut and manicure, and who usually carried an expensive leather briefcase and Palm Pilot. He looked like an insurance salesman, and that was his cover. He actually represented a national brokerage and made good money at it, in between supervising murders and bombings. On more than one occasion, he had pitched cops and federal officers when he was stopped at various checkpoints, and so good was his patter that he had even sold a few life insurance policies to fatpos. They needed it. The lifespan of a federal officer of any kind in Seattle these days was likely to be nasty, brutish, and short. The two men met approximately once a week like this, always in a different hideout, with Barrow bringing Dortmunder up on everything going on in the command, and the two of them assigning the coming week's mayhem quota to the crews and individual volunteers who comprised the 100 or so people in 3 Brigade. Other than such meetings as this, they stayed apart so that the Federals could not take them out both at once. If Barrow died or was arrested, Dortmunder would be able to step in immediately and keep 3 Brigade going without a hiccup. If Dortmunder bought it, then any one of half a dozen company commanders in the brigade were capable of stepping into his shoes. Despite the danger, these personal conferences were a necessary evil. The NVA could of course communicate among its various elements by telephone and computer, and sometimes had to, but all electronic communication in the Empire was monitored by the Federals and analyzed for anything even remotely suspicious. And so phone conversations and emails necessarily had to be short, to the point, and in code. As risky as it was, there simply was no substitute for direct sit-down. Neither men carried or used any notes. If the feds seized Dortmunder's Palm Pilot, they would find nothing but insurance. Barrow began by going over the various activity for the past week. "Right, let's get the routine stuff out of the way," he told Dortmunder. "Next time you see Jock Graham, give him my compliments and my congratulations on his becoming a millionaire. Looks like those two fatties his boys took out last in that yuppie Fern bar last night pushed DHS over the edge." "Yeah, I saw that on the tube," said Dortmunder. "He's officially $1 million man now, and they were running his picture again. The feds sure do love to create these super-terrorist constructs, like Bin Laden and Zarqawi in Iraq, and Hamed Berghash in Syria. Graham's hot as bubbling cheese these days. Count yourself lucky Zog doesn't seem to know who you are yet. Jock seems to have the old rebel luck keeping his head down. Let's hope it holds. Never mind 2 Brigade. How are we doing this week?" Dortmunder sat back with a sigh. "The bad news first. We took 2 arrests in Bellevue," he said. "Volunteer Charlie Burke and volunteer Steve Swearingen. Tuesday night, they were clocking Fatpo Captain Kayeshia Stansel, who, as you know, is the press officer for Fatty in Seattle, the negress everybody sees on TV flapping her bubble lips about how we gon' get racist honky mutafukas. They spotted her and another Fatpo, a black male, going onto the beach at Lake Sammamish, dressed in jogging suits. They called it in and said it looked like the stupid Sheba was dumb enough to go jogging with only one man as an escort. They were strapped. They asked my permission to take them down, and I gave it." "You think even a nigger is stupid enough to go jogging in public after what's been happening in this city for the past 5 years?" asked Barrow sourly. "Covington." "It happens," said Dortmunder defensively. "I figured this might be one of the times when we got lucky. I also weighed the possible propaganda value of removing the public face of Fatpo. The men were willing to take the chance. Joe, no need to apologize. You did what you had to do. We're officers in an army at war. We have to take targets of opportunity, and we have to order young men to their deaths. At least these guys aren't dead, although after a few interrogations in the FBI electric chair they'll wish they were. How did it happen? Not clear. I never heard back from them, and we can't find anyone who saw it go down. It may have been some kind of setup with the Stancil woman as bait, either with or without her knowledge. It may have been our guys just plain flubbed it. We just know from our sources in the federal system that Volunteer Burke and Volunteer Swearingen were signed in at Auburn FCI yesterday, so they got them somehow. They're good men, said Barrow sadly. Well, we broke Auburn open once, we'll break it again, and one day they'll be free. Good news now. Tell me about those tickles in Green Lake and out on Highway 169. Those were ours, confirmed Dortmunder with a grin. Me like, exclaimed Barrow, clapping his hands. Green Lake was Sammy Feet's crew, Dortmunder went on. Targets were Colonel Alan Armbruster, U.S. Army Intelligence, and one James R. Spanhouse, Department of Homeland Security. Big zognobs both. Nightshade spotted them in some after-hours club, up on Capitol Hill. One of them tried to pick her up, and she recognized Spanhouse from one of our websites, so she stroked him, and she was able to set the both of them up for a company. Said she and a friend would meet them in the pirate's lair in Green Lake the next night. And she's good enough so they believed her. What exactly were they involved in? Asked Barrow. Nobody seems to know quite what the hell they were doing up here, working with the FBI or what. God knows what all these federal spooks do with their time here in the Northwest. There's so damned many of them they must be tripping over each other's shoelaces. But in any case, whatever they were up to, they're not doing it anymore. Sammy Feet and Georgie Brenner blew them both away in the pirate's lair Sunday night, with the charming Miss Carla Sobek doing the honors behind the wheel of the getaway car. Textbook. No muss, no fuss, no bother. 9 mils at close range. Our guys walked into the bar, made the spooks, clipped them both, and walked out. Extraction neat and clean, finito. Great. Convey my congratulations to Samuel and his team on a job well done, said Barrow with satisfaction. The other major tickle out on Highway 169, it was a simple Baghdad banger in a recycle bin beside the road. Humvee blown off the asphalt just out of Maplewood Heights. 3 dead fatties. Pyrotechnics courtesy of Dr. Doom. Some good old bathtub gelignite just like Mom used to make. Dr. Doom. That's that kid who always has his nose stuck in a computer game, right? Yeah, if we can tear him away from his Nintendo for long enough, he makes a hell of a party favor, Joe told him. Other than the loss of the 2 volunteers, things went well this week. The EO unit successfully detonated 4 other bombs besides the Baghdad banger. Nothing that big, though. 3 against economic targets run by non-whites or Jews. 1 at the police motor pool when they did the old Trojan horse trick and got the cops to tow an impounded Volvo that was wired up. The tow truck driver was killed as well. From now on, even at $800 a car, I think we can safely say that no private contractor in his right mind will be towing any more wheels in Seattle. Uncle Slime's boys want a vehicle towed. They're going to have to use their own tow trucks and their own personnel, which gives us more targets and cuts down on civilian cooperation with the occupation. $800 isn't worth one's life. We've got 6 snipers out hunting this week, and last I'd heard they got 1 kill and 12 hits. 1 kill, that's all? Asked Barrow skeptically. What are they doing, taking time off to go to the movies? No, it's just that there is an increasing shortage of suitable targets, explained the executive officer. The white man's enemies are finally learning to stay the hell off the streets. The snipers pop at fatties whenever they can, but it's hard to catch a fatty without his body armor, hence all the wounded. I gotta say that damned new hardened nylon ensemble of theirs works, but we're at least making the fatties keep their heads down. Oh, and 1 major arson, Dickstein's Bargain Shoe Barn, which was just about the last remaining openly Jewish-owned business in Seattle. Hallie Wainwright's little brother did that one. I think he's about 13, not sworn in yet, although Hallie wants to give him his button. I know Corby Morgan swore in some 12-year-old a while back and sent him over to Jock when Corby went back up country to take over the Port Townsend flying column. But that's still a little young for my taste. Covington. Hell, half our own brigade is just barely old enough to drive, but yeah, I agree. 12 and 13 is too young. Speaking of which, how's recruiting? Asked Barrow. Recruiting is up. Every crew is working new assets and identifying the assets as possible candidates. And 4 new volunteers were sworn in this week by company commanders. So despite the 2 seasoned men we lost, we not only replaced them but increased our numbers. And that's our brigade alone. I understand that 1 and 2 are doing even better. New weapons are in from the GHQ quartermaster, and we got our share. Took delivery Sunday. We now have enough AK-74 seconds and Russian ammunition to choke a horse, which we can use to arm new men when it gets to the open fighting stage. They're being distributed to company quartermasters for dispersal and storage, with 800 rounds per weapon. Also, the agitprop unit sent out 2 million email spams and was able to scatter 2,000 leaflets in Bellevue Square. That's kind of pre-1022, isn't it? Leaflets are much more dangerous than email, Barrow reminded him. Are they sure they want to be taking that kind of risk just for a damned leaflet? Yeah, I know, but leaflets can be touched and are something physical, much more impressive to people than mere cyber junk. It really rattles cages. They know that Jerry Reb was here. It's almost as exciting to find a leaflet in your mailbox as it is to watch a hit on the news. I do have one major new thing for you, said Dortmunder. So do I, said Barrow. Me first. Mr. Chips is coming in tonight and wants to talk with both of us. You need to be back here at 8 sharp. Any idea what he wants? Asked Dortmunder. No, he wouldn't say, but it's something urgent. He didn't want you at the meet at first, but I told him we were Siamese twins.
I appreciate that, sir, replied Dortmunder.
I get cacked. You need to know everything I know. But this isn't just his regular circuit for the Army Council. It's something urgent. They're probably going to launch some kind of new offensive strategy. They keep diddling with various new ideas they think might make a dent. Personally, I think we're starting to get close now with Apple's Mash and Pig Kill. You think they want us to try something like that here? Asked Dortmunder keenly. Shut down Seattle. What for? Wondered Barrow aloud. We've already damned near run all the non-whites out of town. The city is actually a better place to live for white people now, even with us fighting a war in the middle of it, than it was 5 years ago. Same in Portland. The buses and light rail are safe now. The traffic is a hell of a lot better with all those crazy third world drivers off the freeway, and other than us, crime is damned near non-existent. Now we've run off all the crack addicts and Mexican gangbangers. Barrow did not know that Kelly Shipman even existed, but he would not have been surprised to learn that she had agreed with him at her breakfast table in the wealthy suburbs just a short time before. NVA intelligence confirmed that there was a high level of very quiet approval among the people of the city regarding the changes the ongoing revolt had wrought. One of the reasons that life in war-torn and lockdown Seattle was tolerable was the virtual disappearance of crime in the ordinary sense. One had to worry about getting stopped and harassed at Fatpo checkpoints, and possibly caught in the vicinity when things went boom, but common street crime was a thing of the past, and the gabble of foreign voices and dark faces was gone. In addition, bottom-rung unemployment was now for all practical purposes non-existent. Employers couldn't hire cheap third-world immigrant labor if there were no cheap third-world immigrants to hire. The most loyal of Americans had to concede, at least in the privacy of his own thoughts, that Jerry Reb did have his uses. Operations Apple's Mash and Pig Kill were the guerrilla offensives undertaken by a series of highly trained and motivated NVA active service units, the most daring and resourceful men and women the revolutionaries had. Their purpose was to shut down 2 of the main American centers of power, New York City and Washington, D.C. Once it had become clear that the NVA and the party now had a sufficient infrastructure to establish a government in the Northwest after independence had been won, the decision had been made by the Army Council to take the fight right into the belly of the beast. The message was simple. There would be no business as usual until the Pacific Northwest was free and white. After months of preparation, the NVA had struck at America's vitals. The decrepit United States regime had reeled under the onslaught, and the government was being driven mad with hysterical fear and hate. Explosive and poison gas bombs were detonated on subways and on key bridges and traffic points in New York and Washington, cutting off arterial transportation and disrupting the flow of the business which was these cities' business. Getting into work in either city had become a 4-hour slog each way on jammed crosstown streets, as the New York expressways and the Capital Beltway were cratered and rendered impassable, and overpasses blown to powder. The lily-white suburbs and gated communities where the affluent had retreated were no longer safe, as NVA assassination teams homed in on the key corporate moguls, media magnates, politicians, military officers, law enforcement personnel, reporters and television producers, economic gurus, bureaucrats, Covington, intelligentsia, judges and district attorneys, celebrities, technocrats, and key people that kept the United States functioning, stalking them, cutting them down, causing untold chaos and paralysis at every nexus of power. Mints, banks, government offices, the postal system, television network headquarters, methadone clinics, anything to do with the welfare system that redistributed white wealth to non-whites, newspaper offices, the hydroelectric grid, trendy restaurants, yuppie fern bars and yacht clubs were bombed. Anywhere America's ruling elite met to eat, plot, hobnob, seduce and be seduced, and network with one another was no longer safe. The obituaries in the New York Times and the Washington Post now read like who's who. Over 30 members of Congress from both House and Senate were shot down or blown to pieces. The head of the Federal Reserve took a header out of a 40-story window on Wall Street, with an assist from 2 NVA volunteers who died moments later under a hail of security bullets, but Nathan Morgenthau still had not been replaced, and the economy of the empire was in free fall. Specially designed computer viruses destroyed government and private databases and IT systems of every kind, causing untold loss and confusion and, in many cases, massive unemployment among the largely non-white and perverse populations who now comprised the majority of both cities. In New York, NVA black propaganda operatives skillfully incited tension and created incidents between the city's huge Jewish population and the various minority groups, sometimes leading to riots and pogroms where Hasidic rabbis were hunted through the streets by black and Hispanic mobs. In Washington, D.C., the Capitol building was mortared and rocketed 4 times and finally shut down as too insecure. What remained of Congress now met in undisclosed location. The White House itself was now the regular target of mortars and rockets every time President Chelsea Clinton was known to be in residence, and a White House dinner was penetrated with an exploding cigar that got blood on Clinton's plate as well as her hands. The woman was so terrified that she fled the historic home of America's chief executives and now lived hunkered down in a bunker at Camp David. The government was now on its 4th director of Homeland Security in 5 years. The United States Attorney General was splattered all over the ellipse by a bomb in his limousine, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was found dead in his private washroom in the Pentagon, sitting on the john with his throat cut. The Israeli ambassador was abducted and shipped back to Tel Aviv by Air Express in 9 pieces, collect. These operations had been ongoing for almost 8 months now. The carnage hadn't been all one-sided. Dozens of Northwest volunteers had died, and a batch of 8 were now in the middle of a televised show trial in the Big Apple. The amount of damage done to the American economy was now estimated to be in the quadrillions of dollars, and that was over and above all the other expenses of fighting a counterinsurgency war in the Pacific Northwest and maintaining a tentative but iron grip on a huge oil empire in the Middle East, where America ruled hundreds of millions of sullen and turbulent Muslim peoples by the sword. Add to that the fact that one of the main targets of the NVA was the Internal Revenue Service and the tax collection system, records, computers, personnel, anything to choke off the flow of tax dollars to D.C. Tax revenue was dropping through the floor. It was a very poorly kept secret that essential federal personnel such as FBI, military, and FATPO had not been paid in months, and were now receiving a kind of monopoly money in the form of vouchers that businesses and merchants wouldn't honor except at gunpoint. Off-duty feds were being apprehended robbing banks and committing burglaries. Female FBI agents had been caught dancing in strip clubs and committing prostitution to feed their families. It was clear that something had to give. It was believed by the NVA's 3rd Section intelligence monitors and analysts that the actual function of government in the United States was now at the point of collapse, and Barrow had received orders a month before to begin preparation for the possible implementation of the boldest NVA offensive yet. The seizure of certain sections of Seattle, and the establishment of no-go zones where the NVA and the party would establish a provisional government for the homeland. "Why weren't we doing apples mash and pig kill years ago?" complained Dortmunder. "For one thing, we didn't have the resources or logistics to maintain that kind of highly active presence right up the beast's asshole," replied Barrow. "Those are our best people who are bombing those subways and whacking those bureaucrats. There's a lot of targets, our losses are heavy, and they need a lot of support in terms of manpower, money, and supplies. The first couple of years after 10/22, it was all we could do to stay one jump ahead of the bastards and bite back every now and then. No way we could have mounted an offensive like this. But the main reason is that suppose we did bring Zog to the table 5 years ago, what did we have to negotiate with? Now the party has the infrastructure necessary to run our own country. We didn't have that before. Anyway, we need to meet Mr. Chips here at 8 tonight. I wanted to use the Big Rock Candy Mountain. Covington. But the turtle tells me that some guys he didn't know were sniffing around the place and I'm chilling it. Now what did you have for me?" Dortmunder scowled. "We may have to do another off-Broadway production, sir, as in offing somebody on Broadway. We've got a problem shaping up in Capitol Hill. Again. Okay, that problem being?" "Country Joe Krajewski," replied City Joe Dortmunder. Capitol Hill was at one stage one of the most prestigious old neighborhoods in Seattle, sitting draped on a hillside to the east of downtown. It was founded during the city's brawling early days as a pioneer port shipping lumber, furs, and fish. The northern part of the neighborhood near the Arboretum was still a place of mansions and stately older homes, some of them still trying to operate as bed and breakfast inns in a city in the grip of a violent revolution. The campuses of Seattle Central Community College and Seattle University marked the southern edge, while 2 commercial centers still managed to maintain a viable if reduced economic life, a small, fairly quiet strip along 15th Avenue and Broadway. The center of the district was the Broadway Market, once a thriving set of offbeat shops, boutiques, and alternative bookstores. Before the revolt, it had been a northwest version of the San Francisco's Castro District or New York's Soho. Broadway on Capitol Hill had been Seattle's main drag for buggery and boogie-woogie for almost a generation now. The grunge rock scene of the 1990s had originated in Seattle and on Capitol Hill, and the district was renowned the world over for its large gay population and drug scene as much for its musical ambience. Seattle, rock and roll, far-left political causes and alternative lifestyles had once gone together in the public mind like cheeseburgers, fries, and Coke, a natural combo. But much to everyone's surprise, the NVA established itself in Seattle on the very day of the October 22nd uprising in Coeur d'Alene, when 2 volunteers had machine-gunned a black police officer and his Asian female partner right on Pioneer Square. Ever since then, no matter how rough the going for the rebellion throughout the Northwest homeland, the city's streets had crackled with nighttime gunfire and the thud of bombs going off on a regular basis. The result was an increasingly unfriendly environment for perversions of both mind and body. As the NVA vice had slowly clamped down on the Northwest over the past 5 years, Capitol Hill had lost much of its left-wing cachet, as those artsy, fartsy habitués who were dusky of skin or sexually inverted either fled to more hospitable climes or got well and truly wasted, shot dead on the pavement by the NVA gunners. The rest of the pervs and the third-worlders took the hint, and they got the hell out. The once eagerly sought apartments and studios in the charming Victorian houses which had commanded a king's ransom in rent were now 50% vacant and going for a song. It was hard to find a Chinese or Korean-operated bodega anymore, anywhere in the city, never mind a Jamaican reggae bar, or a Marxist bookstore, or a shop specializing in homo-sex toys. The city's dwindling non-white population tended to keep off the streets, and the bugger boys were now cowering way back into the closet. Barrow rubbed his jaw in rumination. Country Joe Krajewski, eh? I lost track of the rock scene when I got over Pearl Jam as a kid, but yeah, the name rings a bell from my days in the blue. Yeah, I got him now. Ayatollah rock and roller, long-haired greasy freak, covered with tattoos, big druggie. We rousted him a couple of times for crack and heroin and other such comestibles. But he could always hire the most expensive lawyers in town, and if memory serves, we were never able to make anything stick. Geez, is Joey still around? Thought by now he would have booked it down to L.A., or out to New York, once things got hot for his kind around here. He couldn't make it outside Seattle, Dortmunder responded. His muse, such as it was, didn't translate. Country Joe is an aging specimen of what used to be called grunge rock. At one stage he pretty much mastered the R&R scene here, lived out on Bainbridge Island in a big mansion, threw wild orgies, chartered jetloads of hangers-on to fly to Maui or Taos for a weekend, etc. Since the war began, rock and roll has kind of gone downhill in Seattle, what with us greasing all the nigger bass players and drug pushers and other essential appurtenances of the scene. Country Joe lost his mansion and ended up in a seedy walk-up on Capitol Hill. He seems to be taking it personal. He was always a parlor pink like all of these people, and he and his Jew buddy and drug connection Jake Kaplan have got this idea of trying to revive rock against racism. Kaplan, yeah, now him I remember. Coke dealer to the stars, used to be the retail representative on the street for the Colombians. Boy, that's a blast from the past. Those assholes were among the first to go back after 10/22, said Barrow. In fact, some of my own first hits were when we cacked the lead vocal in Ooze and the drummer in Stomach Pump, plus a couple of Jew agent and impresario types. Those rock and roll Antifa characters haven't dared to so much as strum a chord in Seattle for years. What gives? Yeah, well, seems Country Joe is having a midlife crisis. He's getting nostalgic for the good old days of sex and drugs and rock and roll, and he wants to try and trot out some of those golden moldies from Rock Against Covington. Racism. He has been in touch with Homeland Security, and they like the idea for obvious propaganda reasons. They're thinking of staging a big Rock Against Racism concert in Discovery Park. They think they can get away with that and not get hit in the head by the NVA? Asked Barrow in amazement. Oh, they know the risk is too great for any real concert, replied Dortmunder. That could just get all kinds of embarrassing when the RPGs start flying. But this won't be real. It will be a virtual concert. Huh? Asked Barrow. I'm not 100% on the technology, but apparently there is a way for the rockers to get up on a stage and actually do their gig. In Discovery Park, presumably under massive guard from FATPO and the military, and then have the government computer tech people add in a big crowd at the central broadcast point. To those who watch the concert on TV, it will look like they've got the park packed with thousands of cheering, boogieing fans. The idea is to broadcast the concert worldwide, make it look like the people of Seattle came out for it by the 100,000, and by appearing to hold this gig with impunity, show the world that the NVA is a paper tiger. The battle for democracy and diversity is being won in spite of all the dead feds and restaurants, so forth and so on. And needless to say, the world media will go along with this hoax? Asked Barrow in disgust. Does a bear shit in the woods? Okay, we need to nip this one in the bud, said Barrow decisively. Country Joe seems to have forgotten his manners. He needs a ticket to that great crash pad in the sky. What exactly have you got on this little project, and where did you get it? Nightshade again, said Dortmunder. Nightshade is diamond, agreed Barrow. Damn, that chick is on top of it. Has third section got her spying on rock degenerates now? This was kind of serendipitous, Joe told him. She's been sleazing around Capitol Hill in Ghoul, trying to set up fatties. A lot of them sneak out of barracks when they're off duty to do the clubs, and score some drugs and pussy for the male officers. Drugs and pussy for the female officers as well. Ghoul, that's the Morticia Adams look, right? Asked Barrow. Yeah. Kind of decayed goth with a touch of Elvira, but not as classy. You make your bones by making your bones, literally. You dig up a grave and... Yeah, I get the idea, said Barrow, waving it away queasily. God, every time I think America can't sink any lower. Go on. Anyway, she started hanging with some punk rockers meeting in those sleazy clubs off Broadway on Capitol Hill, and she hooked up with Krajewski and Cappy. They're meeting with some character from Homeland Security tonight in the eclectic Strawberry Veggie Bar at 10 o'clock. If we get on it quick, we can not only whack a couple of degenerates but a federal suit as well. The Fed might be a very nice little bonus. Homeland Security generally stays far away from the homeland, so to speak. You read my mind. What do you say? Should we give Sammy Feet a tickle-tinkle? He'd love it, but no, I'd say give this one to Bobby Bells, advised Dortmunder. He and his people know that Broadway area like the back of their hands. Remember that take back the streets for love crap? Back in the early spring, the tattered remains of the local gays and lefties who hadn't been killed or run out of town had decided on one last attempt to restore their previously paramount profile within Seattle and recover their chic. They had joined with the city government and an approving liberal media, and with great fanfare they had declared the Capitol Hill district to be a hate-free zone. In order to enforce this, they had declared so-called walk for love areas where homosexuals and race mixers would parade around holding hands and otherwise, getting tactile with their multifarious same-sex and or different race-significant others, snogging on the sidewalks and generally showing a high profile. This was not quite as harebrained an idea as it might appear at first glance, since before they ventured out to do this, the whole area was heavily infiltrated with plainclothes FATPO and Seattle PD teams, waiting to pounce on any rebels who tried to do anything about the displays of degeneracy. The idea from the Federals' point of view was to use the same-sex and racially mixed couples as a kind of live bait to lure the NVA out, and indeed the FATPOs themselves obligingly provided a number of mixed decoy teams of every conceivable race and gender combination, concealed weapons at the ready to jump up and start blasting in mid-snog at the slightest manifestation of evil racism and homophobia. It was a measure of how desperate the Federals were for targets, and how deficient was their intelligence in every sense of the word. They couldn't figure out any other way to draw the NVA out. The NVA had countered Walk for Love with an operation called Springtime for Hitler. The commanding officer of the 3rd Brigade's company, Lieutenant Robert DeBella, also known as Bobby Bells, had been assigned the task of preventing this public relations embarrassment for the NVA, and he had developed a full-court press offensive that cleaned it up in 2 days. A. Covington. Bells was a natural-born street fighter, an instinctive tactician like some untrumpeted Patton of the asphalt. He knew that it was suicidal to get up close and personal with the couples scattered all along Broadway, because there was an armed enemy lying in ambush behind every window and lamppost just waiting for the volunteers. So he decided to use an indirect multiplier effect to shut the project down by sucking all the propaganda vitality out of it. The unit was able to obtain a number of heavy weapons, some RPGs and proper mortars, but also things like sticks of dynamite and military-issue white phosphorus grenades that were attached to sticks of wooden dowling, which were then inserted into single-shot 16-gauge shotguns, which were loaded with shells from which the buckshot had been removed, thus making a ballistite cartridge. By pulling the pins on the grenades and firing the shotguns into the air, they was able to create a primitive mortar which burst high on the rooftops or in the middle of the street, showering everything around with a snowfall of white, burning fragments that immediately set multiple fires. This, plus several quick hit-and runs with the RPGs and the mortars fired from the back of pickup trucks, caused all manner of damage and set more fires at a distance. The arrival of the fire trucks inevitably disrupted all the interracial and homosexual love-walking, the crowds and confusion not only diverting and snarling the target couples and their plainclothes escorts, but making it fairly obvious to keen-eyed observers who was who on the street. On several occasions, running gun battles broke out between teams of NVA shooters in the FATPOs, with casualties on both sides, but the news at 10 that night was about flying bullets and burning things on Broadway, not loving interracial and gay couples, standing tall and proud for diversity, while canoodling and grazing in the grass. On the second night of the Walk for Love, a daring NVA pilot hijacked a small private airplane from the King County Airport, aimed it dead center in the middle of Broadway, and bailed out at the last second, making a big hole and an unholy mess in the street. The lesson was clear. The Northwest Volunteer Army had no intention of coming out in person to attack the individual couples and their heavily armed escorts, but the rebels would continue to steal the liberals' propaganda thunder and create such disruption that the government's PR purpose was not being served. The undercover fatties were hard put to it to defend themselves, never mind protect the bait, and what is worse, it was clear from people who were watching the news coverage that this was the case. FATPO were being made to look like incompetents. The result was the collapse of the Capitol Hill liberal and gay scene, which was why Barrow was surprised to learn that this country Joe Krajewski character would even try to revive a dead horse. Yeah, Bobby knows the lay of the land around Broadway, but isn't he a bit short on triggers right now since we took Slim Jim and those others to form E Company? He asked. He's got some new people he wants to break in, replied Dortmunder. That's another reason I suggested him. He's got a couple of kids who are just itching to make their bones, and Bobby thinks they've got the stuff. Okay, give Bells a bell and set it up. One red flag, though. There's a good chance that Nightshade herself is going to be with Country Joe and Cappy when it goes down. She's been playing groupie, and she had to really feign an interest in this Rock Against Racism project in order to gain entree. And get Krajewski interested in her. Barrow pointedly avoided asking how far Krajewski's interest had gotten him. It was irrelevant, so long as the intelligence was good. Can't she find some excuse to do a fade just before it goes down? Asked Barrow. Maybe. But she also wants to maintain her cover on the hill, and cops and fatties aren't stupid. Anytime there's a hit, they know there's a finger somewhere, and somebody who disappears just before the bullets start flying is an obvious suspect. Barrow scowled. I know those third section ops have got balls the size of grapefruits, male or female, but we can't risk her getting shot by one of our own. And let's face it, sometimes the boys do get a bit trigger-happy. You or I will have to go along and make sure both Nightshade and her cover survive the evening, although I'm not happy with anyone who doesn't need to know finding out what she looks like. It won't just be Auburn if she's caught. The feds are starting to give third section people secret military tribunals and needles in the arm. What about Mr. Chips? Asked Dortmunder. Oh, crap, swore Barrow. Damn, that's right. If he wasn't Army Council, I'd send a message to reschedule, but I got the definite impression that this is something serious and we need to take the meeting. Look, Bobby's a cool hand and he keeps his boys on a tight rein. You tell him just don't shoot any females. Make sure he understands that. That little girl has got the right stuff, the old iron in her. If she has to die in all this, I don't want it to be in some stupid accident. We're all going to have enough on our karma for what we've done intentionally during this war without adding something like that. You tell DeBella, no women tonight. God, to think there was a time when something like that wouldn't even have come up, sighed Dortmunder. It's bad enough that men do things like this. Now that women are doing it too, you wonder if there's any hope left for the human race. H. A. Covington. Yeah, well, that's why we're doing this, Joe, said Barrow. So that one day a girl like Nightshade can grow up in the world of Jane Austen again, instead of Clockwork Orange. When you're lost in a swamp and up to your ass in alligators, you know you've made a wrong turn somewhere. The only way is to quit blundering deeper and deeper into the darkness, turn your ass around, struggle back to where you made the wrong turn, and make the right choice this time. And try to leave as few boys and girls as possible, lying dead in the swamp being eaten by the slimy things. Out in suburban Bellevue, in the bright morning air, Kelly Shipman and Molly Bergstrom were having an exuberant tennis workout on the high school court, with Kelly winning 3 sets and Molly 2. The girls had an audience. Sitting on a bench and watching them volley from behind the wire fence, or more specifically watching Kelly play, was a quiet young man of her own age with brown hair slightly brushing his collar. His eyes never left the lithe, graceful blonde girl on the green tarmac for an instant. Cody Brock was wearing a dark navy blue shirt that had come from the Salvation Army store, faded jeans, a baseball cap, and cheap knockoff running shoes from Walmart. He was a newcomer who had entered Hillside just that autumn as a senior, ostensibly transferring in from a high school in Ellensburg. In point of fact, his transcript from the Ellensburg school was a work of fiction equal to anything taught in the English department, and the gruff middle-aged gentleman who appeared at Hillside High whenever he was required for parent-teacher conferences was not Cody's father, but a man known to his friends and to federal law enforcement as Farmer Brown. Cody's mother had been killed in an auto accident when Cody was 3. He barely remembered her. Cody's biological father was a lumberjack and sawmill turner who was serving a life sentence in Walla Walla Penitentiary for a drunken bar fight in which he had stabbed a black man. He had received 5 years for the assault with grievous bodily harm, and a mandatory life sentence for using the word nigger during the affray. When Jared Brock went to prison, Cody had been 8 years old, and his sister Gwendolyn had been 12. Cody and his sister had been immediately seized by It Takes a Village and sold. Gwen he had never seen again after the Federals came and took her away. He had no idea where she was and had difficulty remembering what she looked like, although he knew she was a grown woman now and probably fairly comfortable, since it takes a village only sold confiscated children to those who could afford the costly adoption bond. For some reason he had never fully understood, attorney Larry Saperstein had paid $300,000 for him. Cody had run away from his own horrendous foster family when he was 16, after assaulting his Jewish stepfather with murderous intent. He had made his way from San Francisco back to Centralia, but the town was too small to conceal a runaway, and there was nothing left there of his old life anyway, so he had drifted on to Seattle. After a period of living rough on the streets, most of which he spent in the public library self-completing what education he thought he needed, Cody had taken to hanging out at a soup kitchen run by a Christian youth group. One of the counselors, a trendy priest with a beard and a turtleneck, had made a quiet practice of rescuing young white people from life on the street, the drugs, and so forth, in a rather unorthodox manner. After a period of assessment, Father Andrew would take white street boys and girls off somewhere private and urge them to put their hand in the hand of the man from Germany. Sometimes he even sang it while strumming his guitar. He forwarded dozens of white kids to the NVA in this way, until one of the kids ratted him out in exchange for drugs. One snowy day, Special Agent Bruce Goldberg of the FBI and a team of FATPO officers came into the mission, crucified Father Andrew with a nail gun onto one of the dining room tables, and poured a powerful drain cleaner down his throat. By then, Cody had already been assigned to Robert DeBella's crew and enrolled in Hillside High with Farmer Brown posing as his daddy whenever needed for parent-teacher conferences and so on. He had insisted on using his own name despite the security risk, and surprisingly, DeBella had allowed this. He had been profoundly impressed when the boy told him with quiet, dead certainty, "The Jews took my father and my sister, and they tried to take my name. They tried to make my family disappear from the earth. I can't do anything about my dad and my sister, but they will never take my name again." Kelly had not been entirely accurate that morning at the breakfast table in her assessment of the student body. Being a poor blue-collar youth, or grit in the vernacular, Cody was able to attend Hillside on a special state diversity quota for underprivileged students, which in the recent absence of dark-skinned minorities had become known to most of the more affluent kids as the trailer trash track. The high school gave Cody a visible and plausible cover, and a reason for being almost anywhere. High school kids worked after school in all kinds of places, and they liked to cruise. Cody attended school during the day and was duly rousted by Farmer Brown and Bobby Bells to keep his grades up. He lived at a number of floating H.A. Covington addresses with his comrades and ran every conceivable errand for the crew, from grocery runs to taxi service to smuggling medical supplies, weapons, and illegal propaganda leaflets. He planted a few bombs, set a number of fires, and also drove and occasionally acted as the finger man for assassinations. He had willingly embraced the NVA not out of ideology, but because of simple hatred for the system that had destroyed his family because his father had dared to defend himself against a sodden bully with a black skin, and also because he sought some feasible way to kill his foster family when time and place should serve, and get away with it. It was only when he had begun reading the works of George Lincoln Rockwell and Francis Parker Yockey during his nights on guard duty at various safe houses that he had come to understand why his world was the way it was, and what the NVA was fighting for, and his vague sense of his own racial identity had coalesced into a personal commitment to a homeland for his people. Like so many volunteers, the Brock boy had started out to right his personal wrongs, and ended up as a political soldier trying to right the wrongs of history against his race. Having no draft exemption, he was already supposedly under orders to report to the United States Army Induction Center in September. Orders, which did not in fact exist, since on paper Cody himself did not exist except as a runaway in the California police computers. Cody's ostensible reason for extending his strained high school career by becoming a student in the summer drama workshop for a final 2 months after graduation was because he wanted to have a creative credit on his record so he could get into an Army public relations unit and then once he got out, go to college on the GI Bill for a degree in broadcasting and communications. His real reason for taking the course was that he was head over heels in love with a cheerleader, homecoming queen and budding actress Kelly Shipman. In the social dynamic of Hillside High School, this was roughly equivalent to the stable boy in the palace seeking the hand of the princess, and had about as much chance of success outside of a fairy tale. It was virtually certain that this next 2 months in summer school was the last time in his life he would ever see Kelly, except on a movie screen. She was going on to college and Hollywood and stardom, to a wonderful life that he could only barely imagine, and one which he knew she fully deserved. He did not begrudge her this wonderful future. One of nature's noblemen, he was genuinely happy for her. He himself would stay here in the cold Northwest to kill or be killed for a future he could imagine even less. These were their respective fates. Kelly had won the prize, and he had crapped out. Such was life. He understood this and accepted it. Cody knew that he should have walked away from it after graduation and not drawn out the agony by wasting time in this puerile theatrical gig, but he simply could not bear to let her go just yet. The vision of her was the only memory he would ever have that was good in a childhood that had been nothing short of hell. Not that there was any romance to let go of. Kelly was a wonderful and sensitive young girl, but the teenaged class system of Hillside High was ingrained in her, and she simply did not think of a boy like Cody in that way. Some kids were naturally in and some were out, and boys who wore clothing from the Salvation Army instead of Nordstrom's or the Bon were definitely not in the former category. After a year of diffident, low-key but persistent effort, Cody had managed finally to obtain a peripheral just friends status. Even now, as he watched the two girls volleying back and forth, Kelly saw him watching from the sidelines and waved at him. They spoke almost every day at school and once or twice a week on the phone, and he had even taken Kelly out a couple of times to the local burger barn and bike riding in the park, but to his chagrin she seemed to think that being male, he was a good sounding board for her on and off relationship with class president and football team captain Craig Crabtree, a young man of her own affluent class who was also a major league asshole. Cody had ended up as Friar Lawrence, when what he wanted was to be Romeo. Kelly and Molly finished their game and came off the court, headed for the girls' locker room. "Hi, Cody," she said brightly, coming up to him. "Ready for your first starring role? I'm going to ask Mr. Newman if we can do arsenic and old lace. I'm going to be doing teen queens and bitchy girls for years, and maybe a lot of screaming and slasher flicks, so I want to play one of the old ladies to expand my range." "You'd make a good Mortimer." "Or Teddy," replied Cody. He raised his hand to his lips, tooted an invisible bugle and yelled, "Charge!" while waving an invisible saber. Kelly giggled. "I'll probably end up doing the lights or building sets or something on whatever we decide to do. I'm mostly looking for something to do in the army so I won't end up getting my ass shot off by some Haji. I'm not much of an actor, really," he added with a smile, grimly aware of the ironic fact that he had been playing a deep role very successfully with her for almost a year, concealing his other life from her, and not even giving away so much as a hint that he had a political or racial thought in his head. "I wish my brother Jason would find something to do in the service besides the infantry," said Kelly worriedly. Then she sighed. "Well, I promised him when he left I wouldn't worry about him. I do think you'd H.A. Covington. Be a good actor, but I want to do some stage work and tech stuff as well. Every bit of experience helps, and I probably won't get to do much actual theater for a long time, unless maybe it's some summer stock or dinner theater. I kicked around the idea of going to New York and trying for Broadway, but I seem to have got Hollywood into my blood now. You have no idea what it's like to actually be on set and part of a production. I live for it now. Heck, I'd work as a script girl or a grip if it got me on set." "Well, see you in a few minutes." "Wait," said Cody. He reached into his cheap canvas book bag and brought out a small square gift-wrapped parcel with a bow. It was a collection of 4 long play CDs on language and dialect, a specialty item he had ordered online, which was put out by a famous linguist for one of the major Hollywood studios. Its purpose was to help American actors master over 40 accents and dialects of the English language to fit their characters, from the flat drawl of East Texas to the consonant, less royal of the true Cockney born within the sound of Bow Bells, from Cajun to the sonorous declamation of the BBC and the strine of the Australian bush country. "Happy birthday, Cal," he said. "Oh, Cody, how sweet," she said excitedly. "Open it," he suggested. No, if it's okay, I'll open it at Molly's this afternoon, said Kelly. She's giving me a party for all our friends, although of course it's supposed to be a surprise and I'm not supposed to let on I know about it. Of course I'd like you to be there. You know where she lives, right? We can all go over after class is out. You can follow me over while I drive my dad's present. See that silver Explorer out in the parking lot? That's your father's birthday present? He asked, impressed. Neat. Well, it will fit right in with what all the other stars drive down there in the Dream Factory. Except when you're riding in your chauffeured limo, of course. Will you come to Molly's party? I wouldn't miss it, he said warmly. She gave him a quick peck on the cheek, and then she ran to catch up with Molly and hit the showers. Kelly didn't return his birthday wishes because Cody had never bothered to mention to her that he had turned 18 that day as well. It didn't seem important. The dramatic arts class numbered about 40 students, and they met at 10 o'clock in the school's fully equipped 1,000-seat theater. Affluent Hillside was a magnet school, and as such had a massive array of science and liberal arts facilities of all kinds which were the envy of the West Coast: computer labs, chemistry and biology labs, a fully equipped television studio and student radio station, sports and track fields, an Olympic-length indoor pool, and classrooms with 75-inch screen satellite TV connections where students could hear lectures and watch events from around the world. The drama class was only one of the courses offered at Hillside Summer School. There were also courses in business for future yuppies like Craig Crabtree, law, engineering, television and film, several advanced science fields, and total immersion language classes. The corridors were almost as full of kids as they were during the school year itself. The top students from Hillside High who took these classes could begin college with 1 credit in their major already, plus the advanced track would look good on a resume. There was also the unspoken purpose of trying to keep the largely Caucasian group of young people under supervision as much as possible. A lot of things had been going boom of late in Seattle. Many NVA recruits were known to be teenagers, and the government encouraged young white people to be corralled into group activities where they could be watched. The sub-rose of fear seemed to be that the devil might make work for idle hands. The drama class was taught by Mitch Newman, who was now standing before them, casually leaning back against the stage. He was a hairy, bespectacled man in his mid-30s who affected jeans and lumberjack shirts, as well as a broad-brimmed felt Northwest hat, until it had become uncomfortably confused with the party's fedora. Even today, the NVA were sometimes referred to as the Hats. Mitch encouraged his students to call him by his first name and tried to be one of the kids himself. Newman's reputation in the theatric arts rested on his own 5 or 6 years in Hollywood, during which time he had racked up speaking parts in half a dozen minor films, including the sidekick to a major male hunk star in a cop buddy flick that had grossed pretty well and still brought him a small royalty check every quarter. Newman had sense enough to realize that his talent as an actor was limited, and so he'd gone into production and direction. He had racked up technical, stage management, and screenwriting credits on about a dozen more movies before he had suddenly returned to Seattle. The rumor was that he had been blackballed by the studios after some kind of incident with a young starlet, the word rape being whispered, which rather added to his romantic air of raffish insouciance. He certainly hadn't let it cramp his style with the ladies, and campus scuttlebutt had it that he had been involved with several teachers and was constantly on warning status for inappropriate interaction with female students. H.A. Covington. The actual truth of these allegations was not known for certain among the student gossips, but Newman didn't bother to conceal the fact that he had ostentatious eyes for the luscious blonde body of Kelly Shipman. During the drama department's mid-term production of South Pacific, Newman had practically drooled over Kelly every time she appeared, on stage in her Polynesian grass skirt outfit, and on several occasions he had found patently unnecessary excuses to adjust her costume. A pained Cody had asked Kelly why she allowed this, and he had received a surprisingly frank answer. "Look, I'm beautiful and sexy, and every man who sees me wants to take me to bed," she told him. "It's been that way since I was 14. I'm glad, because that is an asset I have to have as an actress if I can turn it into camera presence and use it to supplement real talent, which I've got. I want to be a Meryl Streep, not a Marilyn Monroe. In Hollywood, sex appeal is a marketable commodity, and it's an invaluable part of my package. It means I won't always be stuck with character parts, and I can get a shot at lead roles. Guys like Mitch copping an occasional feel is a small trade-off for the edge my looks and my body give me. I'm not a slut, and I won't let anyone treat me like one. I have already made a promise to myself that I'm never doing the casting couch. I don't care what part's on offer. But I want people to look at me, the men because they want me and the women because they want to be like me. That's one of the things that makes a star. Sexual harassment was a serious political charge, and it was something of a mystery as to how Mitch Newman was able to skate on it despite the cloud of unsavory rumor that hung over his head. Cody thought he knew. Mitch was widely suspected of being Jewish, although he never actually said so. Like many Pacific Northwest Jews over the past few years, he had learned to conceal his racial identity, sometimes even to the extent of wearing a large gold cross outside his clothes. But there was one student he didn't fool. Cody had lived too long among the tribe, and he knew. Several times he'd attempted to interest his commanding officer Bobby Bells, or at least his friend Farmer Brown, in the idea of killing Newman, but he was unable to provide any proof of Newman's Hebraic heritage. "Look, Cody, I don't doubt your word," DeBella had explained to him patiently. "I'm sure this guy is a scumbag. It's just that we can't go around killing people because we think they might be Jewish, or even if we know they are for that matter. Personal considerations can't enter into volunteer operations. The idea behind what we're doing isn't simply to gun people down on the street like we're some kind of gangsters. The idea is to win our independence as a nation, and to do that we've got to function like a proper army and select our targets accordingly. Now if you can bring me any proof that this guy is not only a Jew but he's doing something to help the Zog, or that removing him would benefit the volunteers in any way, then once you convince me he's a legitimate military target, your Mr. Newman is history." But despite snooping and even a few attempts to schmooze up to Newman, dropping a few Yiddish expressions as bait, Cody was never able to get anything definite. Now Mitch began to speak. "Guys and gals, welcome to the Summer Drama Workshop. In this next 2.5 months, we're going to learn a lot about a complex and exacting craft, and we're going to have more fun than a barrel of monkeys doing it. You can take that to the bank. I'm going to make sure that all of you remember this summer for the rest of your lives. Some of you, like Kelly, are already well on the way towards an acting career, but I hope to convince you that you can use your abilities and your love of drama not just to make a living, but to achieve a fulfilling and exciting life. We've got 10 weeks, and I want us to work up 2 productions for public performance in that time. The first will be a series of 3 one-acts of theater in the round, for which I have selected the most modern and avant-garde short pieces I could find, carefully chosen to give the fullest range of expression possible to all the talent we've got here. You can find the scripts in the course packets that Suzanne is passing out. Newman's harried-looking teaching aide was giving out stacks of papers which were duly passed back up the row to all the students. Cody noticed that 2 of the 3 one-acts were by Jewish playwrights he had never heard of, and the third seemed to be by some kind of Hindu Gupta something or other. A quick glance over the scripts confirmed that one playlet seemed to consist almost entirely of obscenities shouted at the top of the character's lungs. The second was a hippy-dippy dialogue between people pretending to be various plants and animals, and in the third the lines were all to be spoken, while the characters were whirling around the stage like dervishes in a state of nudity, or at least semi-nudity. "Our second production will be a proper, full-blown stage play," continued Newman. "I'd like to hear suggestions from you all now as to what that play will be. Needless to say, I think we need to showcase the talents of Kelly Shipman, since within our own community here in Seattle she has what amounts to star draw, and we would like to make something off the box office for the drama department. But no play or motion picture is a one-man or one-woman vehicle, not by any means. Theater and film are team efforts on every level, and all of you will get a chance to learn and to participate in a professional-level production." Most of the morning was spent in a debate on what the major play was to be, and Kelly was able to carry Arsenic and Old Lace, the minute, H. A. Covington. It was clear that was the play she wanted to do. Newman backed her. It was shameless sycophancy, but the kids didn't mind. Arsenic was a funny play after all. They broke for lunch at 12. The school cafeteria was open, and somewhat to his annoyance, Cody saw that Kelly and Molly ended up sitting with Craig Crabtree and the usual affluent. class clique, which seemed to have survived graduation, at least for the summer, until the privileged kids dispersed to their various colleges and universities. Kelly was chattering away. "I don't see why we have to stay on campus for lunch," she said with a pout, as she wolfed down a chef's salad with diet ranch dressing. "I wanted to take us all out to Burger Barn in my new Explorer. They're scared we'll get kidnapped or blown up or something by Jerry Reb," said Molly Bergstrom, biting into a cafeteria BLT. "If we take that piece of crap Nissan Brock drives, maybe the Goots will think we're fellow trailer trash and let us pass," said Crabtree with a shit-eating grin. Cody ignored him. "Hey, they're just worried about all the bombings," he said to Kelly. "The school doesn't want any of us hurt." In a way, it was good that this part of his life was ending in a couple of months. The intermittent needling and hostility from Crabtree was increasing in frequency. It looked like that situation was building up again, as Craig's hold on Kelly, tenuous as it had become, slipped away, and he looked around for someone to blame. Who but the handy Friar Lawrence? There had always been an element of jealousy there, as clearly non-eligible as Cody was in the competition department. Cody didn't want a repeat of their one serious confrontation. The next time might escalate into something that would draw official attention to him. Craig Crabtree's father had been the senior partner in one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms, and a member of the Washington state legislature who never saw a piece of political correctness he didn't like. Crabtree Sr. now lived in Atlanta, where he held some kind of big corporate vice presidency, which was a thinly veiled fig leaf to disguise the fact that he had fled the Northwest after being threatened by the NVA, leaving his family behind. Craig had the standard rich boys draft deferment and was heading for Dartmouth in September, then on to Harvard Law School and a six-figure income before he was 23. He was an obnoxious type, large and golden and groomed like a male model, dressed to the preppy nines and rumored already to have had some plastic surgery done. He was a football star, head of the debating team, student body president, and never let anyone forget it. That handsome head had almost nothing in it, and what little was up there was bad. He had been the on-again, off-again boyfriend of Kelly since junior high school, on-again, off-again, largely due to his inability to stay faithful for 2 consecutive weeks. In addition to Kelly, he had been known to diddle with Molly Bergstrom and virtually every other attractive girl in his class. With amazing maturity for her age, Kelly had confided to Cody that she was fully aware of Craig's wandering eye, but she kept him around so I can have somebody, but I know it won't ever get too serious. She had also freely discussed the fact that the attraction was purely physical, with details, which was really what Cody needed to hear, but he had sighed to himself and held his peace. Cody had experienced a few minor run-ins with Craig when he first arrived on simple grounds of his poverty and working-class background, since the kid was an arrogant ass. But since spring, when it became obvious that Kelly valued Cody's friendship, Craig had gotten the idea that there was more going on between them than there was, and was prone to fits of sullen jealousy, which Kelly found amusing, yet which made Cody wary. He had been told when he started by Bobby Bell's that his attendance at Hillside was conditional on his keeping a low profile. The Crabtree situation had come to a head several months before, at a spring break pool party at Kelly's house, when Crabtree had showed up drunk and obnoxious, gotten into Dr. Shipman's liquor cabinet and gotten more drunk and obnoxious, and finally attempted to use his superior size and strength to shove Cody into the pool. Cody was small but wiry and powerful, and he had more than once been required to protect himself when he'd lived on the Seattle streets as a runaway. He twisted the bully's arm viciously and sent Crabtree plunging into the water instead, which everyone had thought was great fun except Crabtree. Craig ended up circulating a version wherein Brock knows kung fu or something, and he'd been sucker punched. This wasn't true. Cody had simply lived rough on the streets of an urban jungle for many months, and he had acquired certain survival skills, along with the will to use them without hesitation. Officially, it was teen party horseplay, but the incident had left bad blood, and Cody had an uneasy feeling the RE match would be more serious. Just as the class was breaking up that afternoon, Cody Brock got a call on his cell phone. "Take a walk on Boardwalk," a male voice told him. "Should I pass go and collect $200? asked Cody. "Yeah, go ahead." That meant that the summons was immediate. Cursing to himself, Cody looked around, but he saw that Kelly and Molly had already left the auditorium. With regret, he called Kelly on her cell phone and caught her in the parking lot. "Look, Kel, I'm sorry, I won't be able to make it to Molly's party. Something's come up at work and I have H.A. Covington to go in," he said apologetically. Cody maintained a no-show job at local grocery store, ostensibly as a stock boy, but the supervisor who handled his cards was a party supporter, and Cody was seldom to be seen around the storeroom in his apron. "Oh, that's awful," said Kelly. He was glad to hear a bit of disappointment in her voice, although not so glad to hear Craig Crabtree's voice in the background. "Sorry, but they kinda count on me down there," he said. "Happy birthday again, Kel." Well, he thought, it probably wouldn't have been much of a fun party anyway if he had to watch that asshole Crabtree hanging all over her and the both of them ending up snogging on Molly's couch. Cody ran to the parking lot and got into his own car, a battered 10-year-old Nissan which, like most NVA wheels, was souped up under the hood to NASCAR standards, carrying a few little extras like armor plating in the back seat and side doors. After a long and careful ride through Bellevue, during which he watched alertly to make certain he wasn't followed, turned off to avoid known FATPO checkpoints, and on one occasion to avoid a lumbering Stryker armored vehicle in U.S. military camouflage, Cody arrived at the current safe house which was used as a headquarters by Alpha Company. It was a private home in an upscale Bellevue suburb, with a neatly trimmed and landscaped lawn and the sprinklers turning merrily. From the outside, quite possibly the home of the Brady Bunch. Cody drove by, parked a block down the street, then walked back to the house. He knocked a coded signal on the side door, which was opened by a big chunky man with iron gray hair and a weather-beaten face, a double-barreled sawed-off shotgun in one hand. "Hey there, Daddy," he said to Farmer Brown, the man who occasionally played the role of his father when necessary for the school system. "What's up? We going out tonight?" "Looks like. The boss wants to see you downstairs," said Brown. "He'll tell you about it." In the basement, Cody met with his commanding officer, NVA Lieutenant Robert DeBella, a grumpy and thick-set man of about 50. He had balding black hair flecked with iron gray, tobacco-stained yellow teeth, and a blue-shaven chin. This afternoon, the man who was arguably the deadliest NVA gunman in Seattle was wearing a pair of greasy overalls and heavy work boots. He looked like any Joe Schmo janitor or gas station attendant. As per usual, he had a large, cheap cigar stuck in his mouth, glowing and spewing smelly white fumes. Robert DeBella had joined the NVA for the simplest and most personal of reasons. He couldn't find anything else to do. After 20 years on the factory floor off Connerly Heavy Diesel Engine Factory in Tukwila, he had been laid off from his job when the company packed up without warning and moved to Guatemala lock, stock, and barrel. In his mid-40s by that time, he had been unable to get another job since. He had lost his home and had to move into a 2-bedroom trailer. Medical insurance had vanished. His wife, who was in poor health with a congenital liver disorder, had been forced back to work, and his children had been compelled to give up college and go to work as a construction hand and a word processing temp respectively. In DeBella's simplistic worldview, when one got fucked, one returned the favor with interest, and the NVA allowed him to shoot the people who had done him wrong. He had read Rockwell's White Power once just to confirm what he already knew, and never cracked a racial theory book again. There had been no need to convert him to racial nationalism. A working man since he had left high school, a white male who had grown up with affirmative action, open borders, and third-world immigration, DeBella already knew the economic and racial facts of life. To him, the idea of revolution was simple common sense. When something broke down, you fixed it. If it was beyond repair, you threw it out and replaced it. America was clearly beyond repair, so it was time to try something else. A new country for only white people seemed like just what the doctor ordered. "Sit down, kid. We got a tickle on tonight," Bells told him. "It's a hit. 2 confirmed targets, maybe 3. Some asshole rock and roll singer and his judo pusher buddy, and as icing on the cake, maybe a Fed from Homeland Security as well. They're cooking up some anti-racist rock concert shit, and we're going to put some manners on 'em. This one's a bit of a rush job. I like more time to plan, but as Mick Jagger tells us, You can't always get what you want, and this one ain't complex. You keep saying you want to pull a trigger. Now's your chance. You still all hot and bothered to kill somebody you don't know from Adam's house cat? Yes, sir, replied Cody, striving to keep his voice calm. I've been ready to make my bones since the day I took the oath. I won't let you down. Yeah, well, see that you don't, because our information is that these two guys are packing, and the Fed will be for sure if he's there, so if you flub it, you might be the one who dies. I'm sorry, in a way it's a white man. A volunteer should make his bones on a mud or a kike. I'm sure you've noticed by now that this is pretty much boiled down to a civil war between whites. Tell you what, to pop your cherry, we'll let you take down the Jew, one Jacob Cappy Kaplan, and we'll let Jumping Jack Flash do the white guy. Assuming we don't fuck up, this tickle shouldn't be no. H. A. Covington. Trouble. Lefties are pussies, at least in this country. They've got some tough reds in Europe, and in England where Jack comes from, but not in America. Once we had some Trotskyites try to take over Local 184 at the plant, before it shut down. Jews and feminist bitches. They showed up at the Union Hall with all kinds of commie newspapers and literature. We tapped them with a wrench a couple of times, and they all ran away. Before the war, those street corner commie types used to give the party trouble, showing up any time we had a rally or a public event and throwing shit at us, spitting on us, that kind of crap. But they always were pussies. Even then. And after 10-20 seconds, when a few rounds popped off over their heads, they scattered and ran like mice. Now don't bullshit me, kid, because once we get out there I can't have you freezing on me when the time comes. You sure about this? I did all right when those fatties jumped us downtown, protested Cody. Yeah, you did, agreed Bells. You kept your head good, you aimed when you fired, and I think you hit one of them. Nicked his body armor anyway. But this ain't gonna be a firefight, kid, it's just a piece of work. Clipping a guy cold ain't like defending yourself when you're attacked and playing Rambo all over Spring Street. You're going to have to point a pistol at another man and pull the trigger, and then shoot him again when he's on the ground to make sure he's dead, then walk away and not worry about it afterwards. I think you can do it. If I didn't, I wouldn't even make the offer. Hell, if I didn't think you had it in you, you wouldn't be here at all. For all I know, this Polak guy may have some little 3-year-old girl who thinks he's Uncle fucking Wiggly. But that ain't our department. The party says he has to go, so he goes. Now you want in? Cody gave Commandant Winston Wayne's famous answer from several years before, when in a rare media interview Wayne was berated by a television reporter for causing pain and suffering among survivors of the NVA's attacks. I will not be blackmailed by the tears of children into failing in my duty. Yes, sir, I want in. That's what I figured you'd say. But I had to ask, replied DeBella with a nod, leaning back on the sofa and popping the top on a can of Diet Dr. Pepper, which he then scowled at. I know we can't be doing this with drunks, and I understand the regulation against alcohol, but damn, I'll be glad when we win this thing and I'll be able to have a beer again. He didn't give Cody time to comment, but Cody probably wouldn't have been a drinker, even if the NVA hadn't strictly banned booze among volunteers. Booze was what had gotten Cody's father sent to prison. Booze and tyranny was a bad combination. Okay, here's the spritz. We take 2 cars, as per usual, this time the Caddy and the Cherokee. Bells was a big man, and he liked big roomy cars and SUVs. You and me and Farmer Brown will be in one vehicle. Eddie Hagan, Thumper, and Jumping Jack Flash will be in the second car. The limey kid gets to make his bones tonight as well as you. This one is about as basic as it gets. The takedown is going to be in the parking lot behind the eclectic Strawberry Cafe on Broadway, just off the Market Square up in Capitol Hill. We wait for the targets to come out, we blast them before they get in their cars, and we book. I know the spot. It's set back from the street and boxed in nice and neat on either side, so it should be like shooting fish in a barrel. There are alleys on either side at the far corners of the lot by the restaurant itself, which they could possibly escape through. But they shouldn't be able to get that far because we're going to nail 'em quick and not let 'em beat feet. Hopefully there won't be too many cars in the lot that time of night for 'em to dodge around and hide behind, since the Strawberry isn't a bar, no liquor license, just vegetarian goulash and herbal tea and poetry readings and puppet shows and hippy-dippy crap like that. But we'll get you guys good and close, so we don't have to play hide-and-seek with these motherfuckers. They should be leaving any time after 10. If for any reason we miss him at the Strawberry, we have a probable secondary attack point, McGrory's Pub on 15th Avenue, which is where Country Joe usually likes to wind up his evening. We should be able to confirm if he's there from somebody we got on the inside, but I don't want you two to have to go into a building on your first hit with no recon. Never do an indoor hit unless you've been in the joint first, you know where everything is, and you've seen all the exits and potential problems. They shouldn't get that far anyway. This should go down at the Strawberry. We'll be in the area cruising, and I'll get a code word text message when it looks like they're about 5 minutes from the door, so that way we won't have to hang around the parking lot loafing and looking conspicuous for any curious busybodies. Country Joe? Asked Cody. Yeah, our targets for tonight are 1 Joseph Krajewski, a white male approximately age 50 with long hair and a goatee beard and assorted tats, and a Red Sea pedestrian named Jacob Kaplan, also known as Cappy, short and fat and Semitic, who is also a penny ante drug dealer. Our source tells us that both men are carrying licensed handguns, so the possibility of return fire exists. That means no fucking around. If we do our job right, no one should ever shoot back. We're not out to play Wild Bill Hickok with anybody. We're there to secure the existence of our people and a future for H.A. Covington. White children. Here's a picture of them both. They're circled. Bells handed Cody a flyer for the rock group Concussion, and he carefully looked at the faces of the 2 men he would be hunting tonight before handing it back. That's your target on the right. Make sure you can recognize him so you don't plug the wrong guy. Although how anyone could mistake a hose nose like that one, I got no idea. Remember, this is going to be in the dark, with only whatever lighting is on the street. Weapons? Asked Cody. Weapons will be handguns for you two, and long arms for Farmer Brown and Hagen, because they will be debussing the vehicles with you, and they will. Take out the Homeland Security Fed or Feds, if they're present, and anybody else who tries to be a hero and get involved. I'll let you two root through what we got in the closet, and you can choose your own gun, whatever you're most comfortable with. No full auto? Asked Cody in some disappointment. Geez, I was hoping to hose down Broadway like you guys did last time to all those faggots and race mixers. Cody had been a driver during Operation Springtime for Hitler, and was still miffed that he had not been given an opportunity to pull a trigger. No, too indiscriminate, said Bobby Bells, shaking his head. No mortars or crashing of airplanes either, worse luck. Because you see, just to make it interesting, we got a little stipulation from Brigade. On this job, the night train is strictly stag. You might call it a surgical strike. We waste Krajewski and his Jew guru and any other males with them who get in the way, which will hopefully include a suit or two from the Department of Homeland Security, but there will most likely be a few chicks with the target group, and we have to make sure that we do not shoot any of the women. One of them's ours. Ours? Asked Cody in puzzlement. Yeah, I told you, we got somebody on the inside. She's the informant who's gonna put the finger on these characters for us. A 3-sec op who calls herself Nightshade. How dramatic. A girl spy with a neat, slinky code name, laughed Cody. What does Nightshade look like? All black leather and a black beret, no doubt, and sunglasses, even at night? Hell, for all I know, she may have 3 tits, replied Bells with a shrug. We don't know what she looks like. We never had no need to know before this. Just be a gentleman tonight and don't clip any of the bimbos. I'm assuming this broad has sense enough to duck when the lead starts flying. Now, we're going to have to leave early to get over into the city the long way, because according to Brigade Intelligence, it looks like Fatty has got checkpoints on I-90 and the 520 both laid on for tonight. Remember that if you have to end up having to E&E on your own for any reason, stay off the bridges. Cody went upstairs and made himself a sandwich, which he ate. And then he and Jumping Jack Flash, an intense blonde young Englishman with an upper-class Oxonian accent, to go with his incongruous Cockney nickname, went back down into the basement where they were shown to a large metal arms locker and allowed to choose their armament for the evening. Cody was not allowed to carry a weapon unless he was actually out on duty, since wide-eyed golly gee teenager or not, there was simply no way to talk his way out of getting caught with a gun. This had already proven to be a worthwhile precaution on several occasions, when he had been stopped, frisked, and manhandled by Fat Po patrols, not to mention his being unarmed the time he Deed had his little set to with Craig Crabtree when he might have been tempted to use a weapon despite the trouble his own father had gotten into in a similar situation. In the normal course of his day, he didn't need one, anyway. But he had been with a company long enough to have undergone extensive one-on-one training in firearms from men who had learned in the imperial military and who were expert and lethal. He could handle and field strip every weapon in the active service unit's impressive arsenal. "We going to be dumping the pieces afterward, Lieutenant?" asked Cody. "Nah, no need," replied Bells. "They never bothered to run ballistics anymore. They just call the meat wagon and mop up the blood. They'll know who did it, and if they catch us, it ain't like we gotta worry about going to any kind of trial no more. So go ahead and pick yourself a good piece, not a throwaway." "Got mine then," said Cody, selecting a 9mm Russian-made Makarov automatic. "Good choice," said Bells with a nod. Jumping Jack Flash chose a 9mm Heckler and Koch P7, and Bobby Bells handed them extra magazines and boxes of ammunition to load the clips with. He himself carried on old, well-oiled model 1911 Colt in his belt. It had been his father's service-issue handgun in Vietnam and was his good luck piece. "Farmer Brown and Eddie Hagen will be backing you guys up with long arms in case anything goes wrong," Bells reminded them. He politely avoided saying "in case you freeze." "They'll be packing AKs 74 seconds with folding stocks and armored piercing ammo to cut through any Kevlar the Fed may be wearing. We got a lot of those nowadays," he said, pointing to a table stacked high with the Russian rifles. "Came in on a freighter from the motherland or something, along with a whole shitload of Russian H. A. Covington. Made 5.45mm ammo. Might as well use 'em. They're light and compact when they fold down, and they got a hell of a punch. We're going to have to leave now, since we're taking the long way around into the city around the lake, because of those damned fatty roadblocks on the bridges which will be stacking up traffic until 8 o'clock tonight. Before we go, though, we give both the Cadillac and the Cherokee a once-over, including the engines. Functioning transportation is just as important as functioning firearms when you're on a tickle. You don't want to run out of gas or have your vehicle cut out on you because of some kind of mechanical trouble in the middle of a hit or while you're running from Fatty. Let's go." As the two carloads Offenva gunmen crept slowly across town from the east side into the city itself, heading for Capitol Hill, the two commanders of the brigade arrived back at Mrs. Sweetzer's place. At about 8 o'clock at night, with the sky still bright and sunny outside and the temperature in the balmy high 80s, there was the sound of a vehicle outside. Barrow and Dortmunder admitted a nondescript man in a suit and spoke with him for a bit while he checked out the room and saw that it was safe. Then he leaned out the door and gestured to a fourth person out on the stairs. The man who entered the room was thin and bespectacled, with salt and pepper hair and horn-rimmed glasses. He wore a cardigan sweater even in the summer warmth and looked like Mr. Rogers. His code name, in fact, was Mr. Chips, due to his former profession as a school teacher. "Hey, Red," said Barrow, shaking his hand. "Any trouble getting in?" "We were stopped at a roadblock at the 85th Street exit," said Colonel Red Morehouse of the 3rd Section and the NVA Army Council. "Nothing out of the ordinary, couple of fatties and some cops. They had sniffer dogs. Our guns were in the side boxes hidden in the doors. For the record, those sachets of Joe Cord's work. Our gun boxes each had one of those little bags of goo and the dogs couldn't smell a thing. Except maybe me shitting in my pants," muttered the driver. "God, I hate those dogs." "Yeah, I know they work," said Barrow. "I was able to get through a checkpoint a week ago." "Dex, you hungry? I got a burger in here and a fish sandwich, and there's drinks in the fridge." He tossed the driver a fast food bag. "Thanks, Commandant," said Dex. He took a soft drink in a can from the refrigerator and left the apartment to go downstairs and wait by the car. Barrow gestured towards another bag on the Formica table. "No thanks, Frank, but I will take a ginger ale if you've got," said Morehouse. Dortmunder pulled one out of the icebox and they sat down. Morehouse got right to the point. "I normally wouldn't insult either of you comrades by reminding you of security procedure, but guys, I've got to have your absolute word that this does not go any further than this room. This is arguably the most important communication you will ever receive from command." "The feds have finally agreed to surrender?" chortled Dortmunder offhandedly. "So it would seem," replied Morehouse in a level voice. There was dead silence for a long, long moment. Barrow suddenly had to remember to breathe. "Spill it," he said, his voice choking. Dortmunder's mouth hung open. Morehouse continued, as calmly as if he were lecturing his students about William Jennings Bryan and the free silver issue of the 1890s. About a month ago, the old man was approached in his cell in Florence Federal Penitentiary by a delegation of high mucks from D.C., headed by none other than the United States Secretary of State, the Honorable Walter Stanhope. The result of that meeting was that the old man has been transferred to more comfortable accommodation within the prison and is suddenly being treated with all kinds of bowing and scraping. Although he's still incommunicado, Commandant Alex Barrett was released from Florence and dropped off at a hotel in Olympia about 10 days ago. Barrett was accompanied by a Swiss gentleman from the International Red Cross and a second man, a United Nations diplomat from the Republic of Ireland named O'Connell. Barrett took 2 days to make sure that he wasn't being followed, and got rid of all the clothing and every article they gave him to make sure nothing had been planted in them by way of an electronic tracking device. And then he re-established contact with the NVA and brought the 2 others in to speak with members of the Army Council. Morehouse sighed and took a deep breath. "They want to talk, the federal government of the United States? They want to talk to us?" demanded Barrow incredulously. "Yes. They sent the Red Cross guy and the Irish diplomat to vouch for the sincerity of their intentions, knowing that we wouldn't trust a damned thing any of them had to say if it was written in Chelsea Clinton's blood. They want to talk about ending the war, or resolving the civil conflict, as they put it. They want to call a peace conference. Nice polished mahogany. H.A. Covington. Table, briefcases, international observers, cocktail parties, redrawing maps, the whole 9 yards. There was a long moment of stunned silence. "Dear God, we've won," choked Dortmunder, his face white and his jaw slack. "Is this confirmed?" asked Barrow, still unable to grasp it. "It's not some kind of trick. Christ, who the hell knows with these people?" "It may well be a trick," conceded Morehouse. "It may well be that the Jews and the super-wealthy Anglo-Saxon blue bloods, who actually run this society, have no intention of giving us our independence, and this whole thing is some kind of stratagem or gull on their part. In fact, I doubt if they do intend to give us anything meaningful. But the mere fact that such an approach is being made at all tells us that freedom is now possible. They wouldn't even have considered such a thing unless we have beaten them to their knees, even worse than we know. Apple smash and pig kill and bombing out their electrical power grids have reduced the entire U.S. infrastructure to jelly. The whole evil empire is on the verge of collapse, we know that much. It's possible that they're now weak enough so we can take what they don't want to give. But as much as I hate to throw cold water on something I can scarcely believe myself, we haven't won yet, not by a long shot. This whole business may come to nothing. But as nearly as we can tell, the offer of talks is genuine and unconditional." "What the hell did the Army Council do?" demanded Barrow. "We started making conditions," said Morehouse with a grin. "We sent the messengers back and told them flat out that we didn't believe them. And we wouldn't even talk about talks until they made a good faith gesture to convince us they meant it, specifically prisoner release. Historically, in these situations, that's always the key. No occupying power is ever serious about withdrawal unless they're willing to release prisoners. We actually had a procedure for such an eventuality planned this far, for the time when this would happen. It's essential that the United States understand that they are going to be forced to put something substantial on the table, and that we will not be fobbed off with words. We just heard back from the Red Cross, and while needless to say the first quibbles and caveats and yes buts were already there, the regime has agreed in principle to release a significant number, as they put it, of party prisoners once we agree to meet with them. Of course, our idea of what constitutes a significant number and their idea are likely to be quite different. The Army Council is drawing up a list right now, but so far it looks like this is legitimate. Now you understand why I insisted that this must not get out. We don't yet fully understand the political and other dynamics at work here, but I can tell you right now that for anyone in the U.S. government to get anything like this through against the resistance of the Jews and the dead-enders and diehards in the power structure must have been like pulling teeth. Somebody's got to be serious about it. Any premature disclosure could screw the pooch for good, and keep this god-awful war going for the next generation. Look, we always knew that at some point the shooting would have to stop once we'd beaten the bastards down far enough, and we'd have to work out the actual nuts and bolts of a sovereign and independent Aryan nation. But we never had a clue as to when or how this could happen. This is uncharted territory, and God alone knows what will happen. What do you want us to do? Asked Barrow. Sit tight, say nothing, and be prepared to implement any order the Army Council may give, said Morehouse. Any settlement talks will have two basic elements from our point of view, both fraught with difficulty and danger. The first element will be a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities. That is going to be very hard to enforce. Shooting people is a very easy habit to get into and very hard to break, and besides, it's such jolly fun. There will be elements on both sides that don't want to stop. The second aspect will be the emergence of the NVA and the party from the underground, and our preparation to assume state power within the homeland. The ceasefire, while negotiations go forward, will probably be theoretically what will be called in place, meaning each side holds its position and doesn't attack the other. But since we have no position to hold, that's going to be a problem. We have to grab hold of one. The Council has already decided that we will use any period of non-belligerence in order to glom onto as much territory and gear as possible. If talks do begin, while they are going on, we have to physically displace the federal forces as much as we can, and get our hands on as much territory and plant and as many economic assets as possible, without actually starting the war back up again. More importantly, we have to make the transition orderly and avoid chaos and mass flight from the homeland by millions of people who are just plain scared and confused, and who we need to stay here and help us build a new land. Remember, many of our own people genuinely believe all the federal propaganda about how we're criminal lunatics who want power in order to rape and slaughter at will, and establish some kind of totalitarian tyranny so we can tell everyone what color socks to put on in the morning. Some of the severe measures we have been compelled, H.A. Covington, to take, and will be compelled to take in the future, will reinforce that impression. It is kind of hard to convince people of our benign intentions with a smoking Kalashnikov in one hand, commented Dortmunder dryly. I know, continued Morehouse. All this means that we are going to have to vastly expand the NVA very quickly indeed, arm and train and organize thousands of troops, and get ready to move into the vacuum left by the departing Americans. We're going to have to stop being guerrillas and become a real army, and we're not going to have much time to do it in. Getting the men won't be a problem. You know that once it became clear Northwest migration was a serious movement, we've always had more people than we knew what to do with, and at any given time there have been hundreds of people wandering around Portland and Seattle and Spokane looking to join the NVA. They just didn't know where to find us. But turning those men into a responsive and capable military force will be something else. You don't want us to cease hostilities right away, do you? Asked Barrow, thinking of the assassination of Country Joe and Cappy, which must be going on even as they spoke. I mean, shouldn't there be some kind of formal agreement or treaty or something before we cease fire? No, until such time as you hear for sure, it's business as usual, Morehouse assured them. In fact, it might be a good idea if we spanked them a little bit harder than usual over the next couple of weeks, to make it clear that any deals the party makes are very much made from a position of strength. Just bear in mind that from now on, we're on a tightrope. One slip and we can lose everything we've gained. We've lost a lot of fine, brave people in these past 5 years, starting with Gus Singer and his family on that. October 22nd, when It Takes a Village came for them in Coeur d'Alene and got their asses shot off by the neighbors. We have to make sure they didn't die in vain. The city of Seattle might be hot during the day in the summertime, but global warming or not, it still wasn't anywhere near as bad as most of the rest of the country. At least in Seattle it cooled off at night. Barrow, Dortmunder, and Morehouse were still conferring at the house in Ballard, over an hour later, as the two NVA cars from a company casually rolled down Broadway and through the labyrinth of back streets on Capitol Hill, wending in and out among the stately Victorian mansions that had once been home to lumber barons and businessmen in the days of Teddy Roosevelt. Bobby Bells was driving the Cadillac. They kept carefully within the speed limit and made all their turn signals. They passed the bumpy and depressed stretch of pavement where the airplane had crashed back in the spring. The car windows were rolled down, and the newly dark air coming through them was now cool, mildly damp from a light rain about an hour before. The streetlights and the windows of the stores and restaurants and bars lit the night with pale glow, a slight mist hanging in a nimbus around each light, and the sound of the tires on the street was wet. Well-known local landmarks slid by in the lambent light. The Sorrento Hotel, Pilgrim Church, Seattle Central Community College, museums and coffeehouses, hole-in-the-wall shops that still managed to hang on by doing a reduced business with the students and remaining locals. They cruised past the hastily renamed Diversity Park on 15th Avenue. The fine stand of greenery on the hillside in the midst of the urban landscape had originally been named Volunteer Park by the designers in Seattle's early years, but on the outbreak of the NVA campaign, the chagrined City Council had quickly changed the name to celebrate a diversity that no longer existed, since the volunteers of latter days had decimated the neighborhood's alternative population, as the motley crew of colorful inhabitants been called. Within the park stood the skeletal remains of the Seattle Asian Art Museum, a ghastly 1933 Art Deco structure which had been bombed out by the NVA during the first year of the war and never rebuilt. Just north of the park, the two vehicles cruised by Lakeview Cemetery, then turned right and slid around the Arboretum. "We should be hearing from Nightshade any time now," said Bobby Bells, pressing the cell phone in his pocket. "I know I'm going in circles, but I don't want to get too far from the Strawberry." The men in the car eyed the almost empty streets. "Gee, I don't see no faggots out here walking hand in hand no more," chuckled Bells reminiscently. "Did those guys really do that kind of thing?" asked Cody in some disbelief. Farmer Brown looked back at him indulgently. "This young feller ain't never seen faggots in public, Lieutenant," he laughed. "Never saw this neighborhood back in its heyday, I guess. I grew up in Centralia, until it takes a village got me and sent me to those kikes in Frisco," said Cody. "Yeah, well, there was a time when this whole part of town reeked of Vaseline," said Brown. "How old are you now, Cody?" 18 years old today, in fact," replied Cody. "Yeah," said Brown. "Well, happy birthday, young man. As the commandant of Auschwitz said to the Fuhrer, if I'd known in time I would, H. Covington, have baked a kike." "So you would have been about 13 when the war started?" "Yeah. I got the privilege of seeing 10-20 seconds from the Jewish viewpoint when I was with the Sapersteins," said Cody with a scowl. "That must have been a real trip," said Bells. "You haven't seen hysteria until you see a whole shul full of heebies who are suddenly afraid again," said Cody with a bitter laugh. "And you the only goy in the place. You lived in San Francisco, and yet you really never seen two men cuddling and snogging in public, joined at the beard, or two dykes tongue-slurping each other in a Starbucks?" asked Farmer Brown, getting back onto the original subject. Thinking about the Sapersteins was a distraction the boy could do without at this particular crucial moment in his life and career. Cody had never actually declined to speak of his foster family, but Brown knew that the very thought of that time in his life made the kid physically ill, made him shake and mutter. Something very bad had happened, that Brown and Bells could see, but everyone in the NVA had their own personal horror story of life under political correctness, and it was understood that one never asked for anything that wasn't volunteered. "You," said Cody in disgust. "Actually, I always say San Francisco because that's where Saperstein had his law practice, and that was kind of the center of things for the family. But we actually lived in Silicon Valley, in San Jose. The buggery was there, but it was all very high-tech and discreet. All the really screaming queens lived across the bay in the Castro. I never went up there." "Well, they used to be all over this neighborhood like fleas on a dog," said Brown. "No more, though. I guess us domestic terrorists must be doing our jobs. Squad car at 2 o'clock, Bob." "I see him," said Bells, quietly signaling and then changing lanes, the Jeep behind them following, as they smoothly slid away from the police car. If the cops noticed the two vehicles, they did nothing. The Seattle PD, like all Northwest departments, had learned that curiosity could kill the cat. Although there was no informal live and let live arrangement as there was between the NVA and local law enforcement in some parts of the homeland, Seattle police were known to avoid getting entangled in related events as much as they could, leaving the task of fighting against the revolution to FATPO and assorted federal agencies, whose job it was, and who were presumably well paid for it. By this time, after 5 years of urban guerrilla warfare, any hostile run-ins between the volunteers and the SPD were usually the result of unfortunate accident rather than deliberate on either side's part. Cody went on. I mean, yeah, sure, I know what homosexuality is. God, who can not know? With sex education classes starting in kindergarten and getting homo and lesbian stuff shoved at us from every angle on TV and everywhere else. But I can't imagine 2 men or 2 women actually doing that crap, especially in public. Why would anybody want to? I mean, what the hell for... Cody's knowledge of sexual perversion was in fact more extensive than he let on, thanks to his older stepsisters Karen and Leah Saperstein. But that was locked away, and there it would stay. Cody, I long ago stopped trying to figure out why this society does the things it does, said Farmer Brown. I used to figure America had just gone crazy, that we'd all eaten bad bread with ergotine fungus in it, like sometimes happens in your rye house if you let the grain get damp. But things have reached the point where even that doesn't explain it anymore. Whole books have been written about what has happened to this country and when and why, but I don't think we'll ever fully know or understand. There's a definite sickness out there, a kind of poisonous mushroom that's been growing in all the dark places of people's souls. Yeah, the Jews are largely responsible, but the Jews never got away with anything we didn't let them get away with. Why didn't we fight up until now? God knows. Little Rock, said Bells. Little Rock, 1958. When Eisenhower sent in the army to integrate the schools and force niglets in with the white kids, that's when the trouble really started. They should have never let them get away with that, the NAACP and their smart Jew lawyers. They was just asking for trouble, letting them get away with that. What kind of man lets his own child be forced in with niggers? I never understood what the hell those white parents were thinking. The people of the South should have risen up again and reformed the Confederate States of America and seceded again, and the rest of the country should have supported the South. And I think back then they would have won too if the white man had just shown a little balls. They should have started shooting back then, in 1958. Maybe if they'd shot those NAACP niggers and some of those smart Jewish lawyers, the government would have understood the word no. Nothing says no like a bullet in the head. But they didn't. If they'd done the shooting back then, we wouldn't have to be doing it now, agreed Farmer Brown glumly. We could have kept all of America, and we could all have had some kind of decent life if our grandfathers had done their duty. Instead, they sloughed it off onto us. That's why you shouldn't worry about tonight or anything like this you do from now on, Cody, Bells told him. You got nothing to feel bad about. What we're doing is something that's long overdue. This is like a historical process here. Too much peace and prosperity ain't natural. H. A. Covington. Anyway, people never had so much peace and prosperity before like we've had in America, and they don't know what to do with it, so they abuse it. It's like a guy who sits around in front of the TV all the time and never gets no exercise. He gets all flabby, like me. And if you don't exercise your mind or your heart, if you're not forced to show strength and courage, then all those qualities get fat and flabby and useless as well, and you get stupid in the head. Nations are like that too. They get fat and lazy and full of dumb asses, because there ain't no war nor natural selection to weed out the bad blood. There ain't no penalty attached to being stupid and lazy. In easy times, the dumbasses don't get forced to wise up or die like it should happen. They gotta get a bat upside the head to wake up their ideas. There ain't nothing wrong with the American people that a good working over with a baseball bat won't fix. You always were a cockeyed optimist, Bob, chuckled Brown. But then there's people like this rat bastard Krajewski we're gonna grease tonight, and his Jew buddy the dope dealer. Some people do all the drugs and race mixing and liberalism and perversions deliberately, because they're not just dumbasses, they're really sick fucks, and bad people who like to roll around in their own vomit. Bad things don't just happen like some kind of natural disaster. Bad things are caused by bad people. Something's broken inside them, and they ain't never gonna act right, so fuck 'em. Somewhere along the line we got this ridiculous idea that bad people have some kind of right to keep on doing their perversions and fucking things up for everybody else and making kids turn out bad and fucked up like they are. Like hell they do. Bad people don't need to be persuaded not to be bad, they need to be hit in the head. That's what we're finally doing. I just hope to God we didn't begin too late. Sometimes I hear these yuppie Barbie dolls and talking heads on TV whining and crying about how the ones we take out are human beings. added Farmer Brown with a growl. Yeah, they are. So? All that means is that they deserve it. Human beings are the only creatures on the face of the earth who are capable of deliberate, malicious evil. Even a shark that tears off a swimmer's leg or a rattlesnake that bites does it because it's his instinct, because it's the way that God made him. Only a human being can deliberately choose to harm another living thing without cause, or lie, or incite others to do harm, or come up with ideas that poison the mind and destroy what others have built. Speak words that cause ruin and pain and murder hope. Where the hell did we get this idea that we have no right to make moral judgments? Somebody has to judge. Somebody has to stand up, say flat out that these bastards who have been ruling the world for the past 100 years are evil. The things they do and say and think and bring into the world are evil. Somebody has got to make these dogs hear the word no. Somebody has to stop them. This character, Krajewski, wants to help a foul tyranny do harm to his own people, his own blood. There is only one answer to that, and Country Joe is going to get that answer tonight. You won't just be shooting tonight, Cody. You will be speaking. Speaking for that part of humanity that is of worth and deserves to be saved. Make sure you make your point. No worries, said Cody. Mr. Kaplan will get the message. There was a soft beep. Bobby Bells took his cell phone out of his overall pocket, illuminated it briefly and glanced at the screen, then put it back in his pocket. That's us, he said laconically. He waved his arm casually out the window to the Cherokee and then hung the next left, heading back toward Broadway Market. Less than 2 minutes later, they pulled up onto the street right at the entrance to the small concrete parking lot at the rear of the Vegetarian Cafe. Although the parking lot was barely 20 yards deep, DeBella took out a small pair of field glasses and scoped the parked cars in the lot. Okay, see that battered-looking blue VW bus with all that graffiti-looking crap all over it? That's Krajewski's ride. He beckoned to the Cherokee. Thumper, who was a former boxer and looked distinctly thumped upon, and Jack Flash got out and came up to the Cadillac. The English youth got into the back seat with Cody. Looks like we got some room to maneuver, Bells told the other driver in a low voice. You stay on the street and get ready to book. Only thing I don't like is that Kill Zone is a little confined. Farmer will take the Fed if he's with him. You tell Eddie not to fire unless necessary, and unless he has an absolutely clear shot. I don't want no mistakes. Thumper went back to the SUV, while Bells slid the caddy into the parking lot and went down the right-hand row next to the hoarding which fronted on the street. At the end of the row, he deftly parked and killed the engine and the lights. Farmer Brown opened his door and stuck the barrel of the AK-74 assault rifle out of it, while he extended the folding stock and quickly chambered a round. Bells turned around and spoke to the two young gunmen in the back. Right. Pay attention to what I'm doing here, because you're going to have to set up your own hit someday soon. I came down here so we can come in from behind them, between them and the alleyways there and over there. When they start running, it will be away from you, towards the street and the other guys. Jack, I brought you into this car because I don't want two shooters coming at the targets from different angles and maybe ending up firing into one another. You guys got your weapons set like I told you? H. Covington. Affirmative, Lieutenant, said Jack crisply. Round up the spout, safety on, confirmed Cody, hefting his Makarov. So all you got to do is just cock and fire. Just to make sure you don't forget to take the safeties off. I'll order you to do that just before we roll out, continued Bells, his voice firm and calm. When the targets come outside, we let them get about halfway to the van. Then I slide in behind them. I'll hit the lights and tell you guys to move. You get out of the car and step forward to point-blank range, but just out of arm's length. You don't want them grabbing your gun or jumping on you and turning this into a wrestling match. They'll turn around when I hit the lights and be blinded for a quick second or so, and they'll be all lit up for you. This isn't a drive-by, and you need to get close. Yes, sir, I remember training, Cody assured him. Powder burn close. Bells nodded. You got it. Maybe you're scared your hands will shake and you'll miss or something. Don't worry about it, you'll both do fine. Adrenaline will kick in and it will be over before you know it, and we'll be rolling back to Bellevue in 3-4 large pizzas from Tony G's. First shot dead center, when they're down another one dead center and a third in the head. Don't worry about the Fed if there is one. Volunteer Brown has got him. And if there's two suits, Eddie's got the other one. Just concentrate on your own target and put him down. And no conversation, no white powers, or Sieg Heils, or tally-hos and pip-pips from you, Jack. Remember, we're the silent killers. That really freaks the media out, the way we keep silent while we shoot. Good propaganda. Jack, once Krajewski is down, you don't look back, you run for the Jeep. Since Krajewski is the main target, I'll be sure to run his ass over on the way out, just for good measure. Cody, once you cack the kike, you get back in the car and don't dawdle. There ain't no reason for this to take more than 10 seconds. I will also repeat for about the 50th time, do not shoot any females among the target party. One of them is a volunteer, and one hell of a cool and brave chick. Any questions? Shouldn't you keep the car engine running? Asked Cody. Nah, said Bells. If they're even halfway alert, the first thing they're gonna spot when they come out the door is a parked car with the engine running. This is another reason why you make sure your vehicles are in tip-top shape before you go out on a tickle, so you can be sure they'll start when... The lighted doorway over the rear entrance to the restaurant began to open. People came out. Showtime, said Bells. Cody immediately recognized the tall figure of Joe Krajewski, long-haired, slightly stoop-shouldered, big belly flowing over his belt, wearing a black cowboy hat, a dark t-shirt and brown leather vest above faded jeans. Beside him waddled the dumpy proboscidean figure of Jacob Kaplan, wearing a loose outfit of runner's sweats and a baseball cap. 2 women were accompanying them. One was a brassy-looking blonde with a generous rack encased in what appeared in the pale light to be a purple half-sweater top, a white faux leather skirt, and patent leather-heeled boots, a baseball cap on her head as well. The second was a thin girl with long dark hair, a very white face, very red lips and eyes shaded with dark makeup, wearing a dark wool pea coat, black leotards, and black running shoes. She carried a canvas handbag over one shoulder. There was no sign of a man in a suit or anyone who might be an officer of the Department of Homeland Security. No Fed, just 4 of them, said Bells with satisfaction. He must have gone out the front or left early. Oh well, this will be a piece of cake. Safety's off. There were 2 small clicks in the darkness. Bells started the Cadillac's engine, then smoothly and slowly slid out of the parking space and turned left down the center row, inching forward, closing the gap behind the 4 people walking to the van. They were talking. Krajewski on the left was gesticulating, and they didn't appear to notice anything until the Cadillac was about 10 feet behind them. I ought to be gibbering right now, but I'm not, reflected Cody. I'm just waiting to do what I have to do. I'm either a good soldier or else I'm insane. Then he stopped thinking about it and fastened his eyes on the heavy figure of Kaplan. Bells hit the Cadillac's headlights and the 4 people were illuminated. They all started to turn. Now, he commanded. Cody opened the right rear passenger door and heard the left door open as Jack got out. He was around the door and running forward. Jacob Kaplan had turned and was now facing him. He seemed to understand what was happening, and his mouth opened and closed in the headlights like a fish. His hand fumbling in the waistband of his sweatpants and came up with a black, snub-nosed revolver. Krajewski shouted wordlessly. The expanse of Kaplan's chest was so broad Cody didn't even have to aim. He simply leveled the Makarov in a 2-handed stance, cocked the hammer back, and pulled the trigger in one smooth motion. He saw the flash from his muzzle and heard the shot, and almost simultaneously he saw another muzzle flash and heard another echoing bang from the other side of the car. But Kaplan didn't go down. He staggered and jerked and stepped backwards, his gun weaving in the air, squeezing off a wild shot into a H. Covington. Parked car's rear windshield. Cody fired again. That one knocked the Jew down and sent his flying. Cody extended the weapon in his right hand, downward at a 45-degree angle, fired a 3rd shot into Kaplan's body, and then, leaning forward, a 4th into his head, and then a 5th shot into the quivering gut just for the hell of it. He could hear Jack Flash firing again and again, and then he saw the Englishman running out of the lot for his getaway vehicle. A woman was screaming hysterically. "Good job, now back in the car," rapped out Farmer Brown, leaning out of the window with his AK at the ready. Cody jumped for the open right rear door. He was halfway in when he looked over and saw Bobby Bells leaning back and pulling the left rear door shut. Jack Flash had left it open. Bells got the door closed, but his foot slipped on the accelerator, and the car jerked forward about a foot, just enough to cause Cody to lose his footing. He fell out of the door and hit the asphalt, rolling, not hurt, but he lost hold of the Makarov. He saw the pistol skitter over beside one of the parked cars. He leaped for it, stooped, and grabbed the gun with his right hand. He looked up, and not 4 feet in front of him he saw the girl in black crouching between 2 parked cars. The light from the poles was dim but bright enough. He looked right into her face, and knew her. Just as he saw that she knew him, and she flinched in recognition. Emily. Emily, what's her name? From Mr. Boland's chemistry class at Hillside High School. Cody didn't stop. He didn't think, he just acted. He clubbed the pistol and swung it at her head, but she jerked aside and it crashed into her collarbone. Ow! She screamed in outrage. Shit! With his left hand he grabbed her beneath her peacoat by the neck of her shirt or blouse she had on underneath, along with a handful of hair, and, before the surprised girl could react, he dragged her out from between the parked cars and hurled her headlong into the back of the Cadillac and jumped in after her. "What the fuck?" yelled Bobby Bells. "What are you doing, moron?" "I know her," shouted Cody in reply. "She knows me. Go!" Bells didn't stop to argue at a crime scene, but floored the accelerator, and they peeled out into the street, then down Broadway. The girl was not going gentle into that good night. Cody heard a dry click and ducked just in time to avoid getting a long and wicked-looking switchblade poked through his eye. He threw himself on the girl, pinned her stabbing arm against the seat with his knee, grabbed her hair and jerked back her head, and jammed the muzzle of the Makarov under her chin. "What's your name?" he demanded. "And you'd better not say Emily, because it's the last word you'll ever say. If you know what I want to hear, you'd better say it now." "What's your name?" She stared up at him in murderous rage, but she had sense enough not to argue with a gun barrel beneath her chin. "Nightshade," she spat. "I'm Nightshade." "Beautiful," sighed Farmer Brown in disgust. Cody pulled away the pistol, the implications of what he had done suddenly dawning on him. "Well, all right then," he said lamely. But the girl wasn't having any. At least she didn't try to stab him again, but as soon as Cody got off her and sat up, she punched him full force in the jaw with her fist, then leaned back against the door and lashed out at him with a kick like a mule. "You stupid fuck," she screamed at him as she attacked him. "Damn it, quit it," he yelled, pummeling her back. "Knock it off," shouted DeBella, his eyes scanning the traffic looking for any Persing police or Fat Po. "She hit me," cried Cody in outrage. "Well, you hit me first with that gun, you son of a bitch," snarled the girl, still punching at him. "Don't make me stop this car and come back there," shouted Bobby Bells. "I said knock it off, both of you." He took out his cell phone and made a quick call. "Yeah, it's me. You guys okay? Yeah, tell Jack Flash good job. We took out both the targets, but after you guys booked, we picked up a bit of a problem. No, I want to get out of the city first. Toad Hall, 1 hour. Stay off the bridges." He put up his phone. "You Bobby Bells?" asked Nightshade. "Yeah, I'm Bobby Bells," growled the lieutenant as he turned left on Yesler Way. "The guy up front with me is Farmer Brown, and your escort for the evening back there is Volunteer Mudd." "Would you mind explaining to me what the hell is going on?" the girl asked. "I use correct channels. I ask you politely not to shoot me, and you kidnap me instead? Oh shit, I left my bag back there, including my damn driver's license. Now I'm going to have cops and fatties showing up at my house." "Tell them we kidnapped you to torture you for information or something," suggested Cody. "Hey, genius, that might work. I've got the bruises to prove it, thanks to you," said Nightshade waspishly. "Cody, what the hell did you think you were doing?" demanded Bells. "H. Covington. This, comrade knows me and I know her. We go to school together. Or went, before I graduated," explained Cody desperately. "Her name's Emily Pastras, and she was my lab partner for a while in chemistry. I saw her at the Tickle. I saw she recognized me, and I just reacted. That's all. I didn't think, I just acted." "You didn't think, all right," snapped Nightshade. "Lieutenant, you think you can get me into a crew with one of the brigades, or better yet a flying column? Because I can tell you right now, my usefulness to the 3rd section is over, thanks to this clown." "I thought you'd blow my cover," protested Cody. "So you blew mine instead?" shouted Nightshade. "Truly brill, dumbass." All right, both of you shut up and cool off while we unass this area, snarled Bells. We're going to an E&E point on the east side, and we'll sort it out there. Give you both a chance to cool off, and me too. Keep quiet, let me think. The girl huffed over onto her side of the car and stared truculently out of the window. Cody could see her thin face in profile now. She had a big nose and not much chin, and her hair seemed to have been dyed black, whereas he recalled it as a mousy brown. Cody tried to remember what he knew about her from their brief association in chemistry class. There wasn't much buzz on her that he'd picked up in the corridors. She hadn't run with any clique he could recall. Her official teenaged social category was ghoulie skank, a girl who listened to necrophilia bands and allegedly performed satanic rituals in graveyards at night. She was generally believed to be a feminist and/or lesbian, but this was pretty much routinely said about any girl who had no known steady, and who didn't take on the football team under the bleachers after practice, in which case she would have been officially promoted to sports slut. She had struck him as a highly intelligent girl, who like so many young people was wasting her time and her mind on stupid pop culture fads, teenaged angst, and resentment against the pretty girls and good-looking preppy guys who ran the social scene at the school. The sort you later heard had OD'd on drugs, or died in some pointless auto accident, and were neither surprised nor overly bothered. During lab, she'd made one or two mildly slighting remarks about Kelly Shipman and her clique with reference to cheerleaders in general, although they were only about a 4 on a viciousness scale of 1 to 10, so he had ignored it and written it off as an ugly duckling's jealousy of a swan. Cody could not recall hearing her utter a single racial or political comment, which of course one would expect from a third section operative undercover. After all, he didn't exactly jump up on the tables in the lunchroom and make speeches himself. Beyond that, their conversation had been strictly chemical, and she hadn't made much impression. She'd kept herself to herself. Cody realized with a start that this was a female version of the way he himself was probably perceived. Hillside High had very early pigeonholed him into the nerd science geek category, not realizing one reason he hung around the chem lab was to procure such items as potassium chlorate and mercury fulminate for bomb detonators, as well as other technical items. Cody wondered if the girl had been dipping into the potassium chlorate jar and doing a little after-hours experimentation like he had. Bells decided to risk taking Interstate 5 as far south as Tukwila, a neighborhood where his old factory had been and which he knew intimately, from which he eased eastwards through Renton, back onto 405 and up towards Newcastle. After a time he spoke. Okay, so Comrade Nightshade recognized you. Only if you'd done what you were supposed to, we wouldn't know whether she was Comrade Nightshade or not. That's a legitimate concern, but the proper procedure would have been to just tell me once you got back into the car, and we would have pulled you out of that summer school and maybe reassigned you to another team if we figured it was necessary. Volunteers get recognized all the time, kid. There are some little towns out in Idaho and Oregon where everybody knows who's in the NVA and they wave at us on the street. Why the hell did you drag her into the car with us? If she had been a civilian, that would make 3 of us she could ID, and you know, I'm a little bit more important than you are. I got $500,000 on me, and all you got is the standard DT. Nightshade's got $100,000 on her, said Emily with a sniff in Cody's direction. It was a dangerous distinction, a point of pride and honor among volunteers to rack up more than the basic domestic terrorist bounty of $50,000 on one's head. There had been problems with bounty hunters in the past, although few lived to collect. So she recognized you, Bells continued. What did you think we were going to do? Whack her out and dump her in the lake just for being there? We don't kill people just for the hell of it, Cody. I told you that when you came to me about that Newman asshole. You wanted to clip Mitch Newman? Asked Emily, sitting up, looking at Cody with sudden interest. Dumbass though you are, I'm impressed. Count me in on that tickle for sure. That guy is a world-class jerk with happy hands. Let me tell you, you either got to be super desperate or a real horn dog to try and put your hand down my bra. He's a kike, you know? He's gotta be. I swear he actually slobbered when he tried to cop his feel. To Covington. Yeah, what did you do? Asked Farmer Brown, amused. Bit the shit out of him and told him I'd file a complaint if he didn't back off. Newman's got a whole file on him up at the office, but they don't do anything because he's a rat for fatty. "Are you sure about that?" said Bells, pricking up his ears. "I told Cody we couldn't do nothing unless he could prove Newman was actively aiding the enemy." Well, maybe he's not actually on their pad, but there were some kids at school who got burned to the hate crime hotline and they all seem to have crossed Mr. Newman, replied Nightshade. "A couple of girls he hit on that I know about. He threatened to drop a dime on me if I told, so it was kind of a Mexican standoff, but he left me alone after that. You see why I couldn't risk him calling me in, since I really am a volunteer, so I didn't push it. Even a blind pig sometimes finds an acorn, agreed Farmer Brown. If you can get me a little more on that, miss, then maybe Cody can get his wish," said Debella. "I'm in his drama class for summer school, so maybe we should wait until after it's over," said Cody. "No need to draw attention to myself. Speaking of drawing attention to yourself, I'm still waiting to hear your explanation as to just why you abducted this young lady." "It all happened so fast I knew I'd been made, so I just felt I had to do something," said Cody defensively. Actually, now that he thought about it, he did know why he had done it. He had realized in a flash that if his cover was blown, he would never see Kelly Shipman again. "Why didn't you just shoot her?" asked Bells directly. "You said not to shoot any women," said Cody. "So I did. Well, lucky for both of you, you remembered your orders at least that far." Bells was silent for a bit. "Okay, kid, I'm giving you a C+ on this one. You kept your cool. Except for your one bird-brained fuck-up, you followed your operational orders. You dropped your target and accomplished your mission. Even when you decided to start making it up as you went along, at least you didn't do anything irreparable." "So blowing my cover isn't irreparable?" demanded Nightshade. "No, it's not," Bells told her in an irritated voice. "Irreparable is if he'd really panicked when he recognized you and put a bullet in your head. And your cover might not be blown. The feds probably would have figured out you was at the hit and questioned you anyway. But their attention has now been drawn to me big time," said Nightshade waspishly. "I'm no longer just a ditzy hysterical bystander. I'm in play." "Yeah, and that's bad. Look, you ain't in my crew. I don't know who you report to at 3rd Section, and I know you have to do what he tells you and not me. But I got 2 suggestions. First off, if you think it's too risky to try and get back under, if you were serious about wanting to go on the bounce and come in with us or another East Side crew, let me know and I'll set it up. But it's possible you can explain away this kidnapping thing. There's enough waltzing Matilda going on all around the town so that this time tomorrow the feds will have a couple more tickles to worry about, and your case might get lost in the shuffle before anybody has time to take a closer look at your story. I'm not going to ask you how good an actress you are, since you must be damned good to do what you do. Can you go to the cops and tell them all about how some badass Aryans murdered your boyfriend and then dragged you into the car and took you off someplace and threatened to do all kinds of horrible things and then sent you back? With a message to the rock and roll community that this rock against racism shit is not fucking on. And the next long-haired dope-smoking bozo who so much as plunks an anti-racist note gets his axe jammed up his ass? "I think I can manage," said Nightshade dryly. "Suppose they don't buy it?" asked Cody. "Then she gets to go to prison, get tortured for real, and probably die with a needle in her arm because you made a stupid mistake," said Bells coldly. There was silence for a while in the car. "Your call, miss. You know best what you do and how far you can push the envelope." "I'll give it a shot," said Nightshade. "It will look funny if I disappear completely, and besides, my mom would worry. My 3-sec control is out of town at the moment. I've been reporting to Lieutenant Dortmunder directly. There's some big deal that came down from the Army Council a few days ago, and they're having all kinds of cloak and dagger meetings here, there, and everywhere. Drop me off someplace near a phone, I'll call the cops and tell them all about how I was abducted by the blonde beasts of Belson and personally flogged by deadly Nightshade, she wolf of the SS. "Bravissima," said Bells. "I'm going to introduce you to the rest of the guys from a company who were with us tonight and give you a couple of cell numbers, so you can get help fast if you need it. I know that's a lot of people to know what you look like. But if you need to reach out or we have to send anybody to pull you out of something, they'll need to know who you are." He pulled off the freeway and into Coal Creek Park and slid the Cadillac into one of the picnic areas, lights off. The Cherokee was already there, its occupants off in the darkness covering the Cadillac. Bells got H. Covington out, lit a cigar, and said aloud, "It's okay. Brown, Cody, and Nightshade got out as well, and the remaining 3 members of the team emerged from the shadows. "I say, you chaps seem to have acquired a souvenir of our evening's divertissement," said Jumping Jack Flash. "Miss Nightshade, I presume." "Who the fuck are you, 007? asked Nightshade. "He is the scapegrace son and heir of the 6th Duke of Frumpingham, who has renounced his title and his fortune to cast his lot with the fighters for freedom," said Cody. "Comrade Nightshade, may I present Jumping Jack Flash? He's a gas. Zyklon B, of course," said the Englishman, with a courtly bow. "Enchanted. And it's actually the 7th Duke, old chap." "And these are the Corsican brothers?" the girl inquired politely. "This is Thumper and Eddie," said Cody, receiving answering grunts. "There was a bit of a fuck-up," explained Bobby Bells. "Actually, there was a lot of a fuck-up, and she ended up coming along for the ride. If she can't talk her way out of it with the cops and the fatties, it may be a very long ride indeed. I want you all to tag her in your minds. We owe this lady, and if she ever needs help from us, she gets it. Got it?" "Her lissom form is forever engraved in my memory," said Jack Flash. "Can it, Lord Haw Haw?" replied Nightshade. "Actually, Lord Haw Haw was an Irish gentleman named William Joyce, who was murdered by the Jews for the crime of having a conscience," replied Jack Flash coolly. "Yeah, but what are you gonna do?" said Bells. "They don't teach American kids nothing in school. Cody, you and Farmer go back in the Cherokee with these other guys. The cops may have a hostage alert out, and if anybody did see a vehicle leaving the scene, it was the caddy. I'm going to drop her off and then stash it. Ed, I'll give you a call and tell you where to pick me up." He turned to Emily. "Now you two, I don't want any bad blood between volunteers over this. This is a war. Accidents happen. Things don't always go according to plan. Sometimes you gotta improvise, and sometimes you improvise wrong. Cody, no two ways about it, what you did tonight was just plain dumb. You compromised a major intelligence asset, and you've put a comrade's life seriously at risk. It ain't over yet. This could still go really bad, and you may end up walking around for the rest of your life with whatever she gets on your tab, which is about the worst thing that can happen to a soldier. Nightshade, I don't have to tell you, shit happens. He thought he was doing the right thing, even if it wasn't, and he kept his head enough to hit you with that Makarov instead of shoot you with it on reflex. Plus, let's not lose sight of the fact that we did accomplish our mission, and we're not carrying away any dead bodies of our own. On the whole, I'm inclined to chalk this up in the all's well that ends well column, assuming you don't end up in the electric chair with some nigger bitch from the FBI taping the contacts to your knockers." "Thanks for the visual, Lieutenant," said Nightshade in a sour voice. "That could still happen, and you don't have to show some kind Xena warrior princess macho or femo or whatever. NVA boys and girls don't stand on the burning deck, they jump off and swim away and live to fight another day. There's no man here who will think any the less of you if you E&E now."
"Are you sure you want to try and go back in?"
"I'm sure," said Nightshade calmly. "Okay then, come on, I know someplace I can drop you." Cody stepped forward. "Look, Em. Nightshade, for whatever difference it makes, I screwed up, and I'm sorry, and I hope to God you don't get hurt over this." "Yeah, well, you're still a dumbass, but thanks for not shooting me," replied Nightshade reluctantly. "That's the spirit," said Farmer Brown. "You two can just consider this your first date." It turned out that the girl was a better actress than anyone in Mr. Newman's summer school course. Cody got a call on his cell phone the next morning before he even started for school. It was Kelly Shipman, awed and excited. "You know that girl Emily from Mr. Boland's chem class?" She chattered into the phone. "You were her lab partner, remember?" Yeah, I remember her kind of," said Cody, his heart lurching. "What had gone wrong? She's a junior, right?" "Yeah." "Well, guess what?" said Kelly, bubbling with schadenfreude. "She was dating this older guy from Concussion, the band. Although God knows how she hooked up with him since she's such a skinny skank and she wears all that ghoul girl makeup. She's probably just a groupie. Anyway, last night up on Capitol Hill, the Spuckies murdered her boyfriend and some other guy, right in front of her eyes, shot him down on the street. Then they kidnapped Emily and beat her up, and tortured her. They were going to kill her too, but she escaped. It's all over the news. The police put computer composites of the goots on TV. The one who pistol-whipped Covington. Emily was this gigantic blonde dude with a beard and all kinds of prison tattoos. They're all ex-convicts and psycho killers, you know.
So I've heard, said Cody.